Oh boy, here we are. Nikki Snacks, unmute yourself. Will,
Shut up.
unmute
Shut up.
yourself. Don't tell me to shut up. Don't
Guys,
you even dare.
welcome all. I'm here with Justin Pennick from Talking Giants and Nikki Snacks, another absolute maniac who's been tailgating with me. And I think the three of us wanted to rant, and then we're going to invite some other people to jump in. But if anybody has any questions or commentary that they want us to address, please tag us and let us know. We want to talk about everything. Um, I guess Nikki, you want to go first?
I mean, I didn't want to, but I guess I will. I'm just, as I'm sure you are, and Justin and everybody, just completely deflated, and everything seems to be spiraling, and this is not how I envisioned the first 3 weeks
Hang on,
going.
Nikki.
And
I'm sorry. I wouldn't do this under any normal circumstances, but I see a Giants legend in my heart, one of my favorite players all time, guard Rich Soibert,
oh
is
yeah,
is here. And
let
Richie,
let him talk.
I've said forever that I think I'm sorry. Richie just left, and I don't I don't. But I think the world of Richie Soibert, and if he ever wants to say anything, I want his opinion above anybody else because he was a part of the ceremony that was unfortunately
Ruined.
ruined by the ineptitude of ownership. But sorry,
Oh,
Nikki, please go ahead.
speaking of ineptitude, Ethan's here.
Oh wow, I might leave. No, I mean, I pretty much said it. I'm just, I guess I shouldn't really curse here. Um, I'm just completely miserable. The days are long, can't sleep, appetite's shitty, and there's the curse. Uh, it's just all terrible. I don't know. Justin, you talk for a living. Why don't you say something?
I do talk for a living. This is true. Exactly what I do. So, um, really, it's what everybody said. The amount of draft capital that this team has had, and the investment and the backing that this organization said that they were going to get it right. And we're fans. Ethan, unmute yourself, bud, because I thought you actually said it best on your own show today about talking about the timeline. And the timeline is why we had the expectations that the Giants would do what they're supposed to do, is because this is year whatever of Dave Gettleman. All these guys, they're coming off their first contract. So the timeline and the expectation of that timeline of kind of the Giants being a competitive team is the reason why we thought that they would be where they're at. But you kind of said it best on your own show.
Yeah, well, I'll speak to that. First of all, very, very mean introduction by you. Not
That's
to,
okay.
yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
That
no,
was
it's
all right.
really wow. That was also mean, Nick. But yeah, the timeline is year 3 of a quarterback. Everyone is expecting the massive jump, but no one's willing to really individually dive into the moves and really figure out if the moves that were made were the right moves and what they needed. And on top of that, the coaching staff isn't helping matters. But like, we're talking about a team whose 2 biggest issues last year was lack of pass rush and a poor offensive line, and they went out and actively made the offensive line worse and didn't get another pass rusher. And then did the Jerry Reese thing of going out and spending $17 million on a receiver, who I was a fan of. But if you look at all the moves, it's like, all right, they're the moves of a team that's ready to compete, but the team is far from being able to compete because these moves are just not right.
But I'll even push back on that a little bit, because what they needed to do was back in January, not now, not that they were 0-1, 0-2,
I agree with
0-3.
you. I mean,
What they needed to do
I know
back in
you and Bobby.
January.
I know you and Bobby talk on it all the time. The time to move on from Garrett was January.
Okay, okay.
But they did.
I know we want to get into a discussion, but I kind of want to get into a little bit of a rant
Sure.
because a lot of people know me on Twitter as being the guy who won't shut up about 2018.
Yeah,
And
miserable prick.
to quote Tony Soprano,
I've
I'm a
never heard that
miserable
before,
prick,
actually. That's
and I've said so
interesting.
since day one. But I've seen this as we're in the middle of the country and we're trying to get to Los Angeles, California, and in 2018 we've gotten into a van and we're driven straight east. And everybody said, "All right, guys, this is like a 3-day trip. Let's see if we make it straight there." And I felt like we've been going in the wrong direction for a long time, and compounding this, and basically, as you're saying, like we did in 2017, digging a bigger and bigger hole. And the number one thing we're relying on right now is hope. We're not, we're going with stability for the sake of stability. We're being stable right now at the bottom of the NFL. We're being stable at the top of the draft. I mean, we're afraid to shake things up mid-season. I'm probably a little less worried about 0-3 than some of the other guys on here. I think we could be 2-1, and I think that there's a big difference between 15-36 and necessarily 0-3. So I'm not where some of you guys sounded like you are with Joe Judge, but we've been relying on hope. We did that with Eric Flowers. We're doing that with Saquon Barkley. There are two different the Saquon Barkley conversation. There's Saquon as a running back, and then there's Saquon as a face of the franchise. And we can't excuse Saquon being the face of the franchise for Saquon's shortcomings as a running back that helps us win anymore. And I think I've got to a lot of what I've wanted to say, but this has all been avoidable, and that's what kills me so much.
And you've been voicing that exact opinion for how long, and people have just shit on you for how long.
Forget what people say. I understand wanting to trust the ownership. I really do. I felt like 2018 when I had all of 3 followers and I was on here for 9 years. I've been on Twitter since 2009. And nobody knew who the hell I whatever. I was a homer too. But I feel like it's like the game you play in middle school where you go under a tent and you sit on the people's knees, behind you, and you're counting on that. It's like a trust fall, and the ownership and the management from this team has failed to catch us. And there's just been a flagrant display of incompetence time after time. I mean, some of the moves have been historically bad. A record-setting contract for a tackle that's probably past his prime right as you're about to start to rebuild. Obviously, number 2 overall without picking up the phone. I mean, even if they passed on number 2 overall, not even trading, not even thinking about getting more picks, the Jets are taking quarterback. You pass. You save $4 million over 1 year. I mean, nobody does that in the NFL, but think 2-dimensionally, not 1-dimensionally. I'm going to mute myself for a little bit because I've been ranting too much, and then I want to open it up if anybody else wants to hop in.
Well, it's also another thing, and this is year 4 of the general manager's regime, and it's his second coach, which I still don't understand how he was able to stay here when Sherman got axed, but that's a story for another day. And everybody is calling for his head. He's had, Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, the 2nd, the 4th, the 6th pick, right?
And also the
11th pick. Yeah,
that was traded back to the 20th.
That was traded back. Yes, one great move, phenomenal. And we're on year 4, and we still, besides what Will said, get the record out of the way. But we still have question marks everywhere. We don't know if this is the right coach. We don't know if this is the right staff. We don't know if this is the right quarterback. The offensive coordinator doesn't give the guy a chance to succeed. So Ethan, I think you emphasize this on Twitter all the time. We're not even getting a chance to see if Daniel Jones is going to have a chance to be the quarterback next year. Right. And in an offseason, that's extremely important with 2 first-round picks. If you got to get a guy, how the hell are you going to know if Daniel Jones is any good? We all think he's playing okay, but he's not exactly elevating his game for us to win these close, tight games. So it really is just such a mess, and it all trickles down to years ago and countless miscalculations year after year after year after year.
And it's not even that too. They're a very good chance that they have 2 top 10 picks, and outside of that, their 2nd-round pick is going to be incredibly high, virtually.
It's going to be like a late first, yeah.
And then on top of that, they have 2 third-rounders. So they have I hate to say it because the Giants are a mess, and my distrust in John Mara surpasses many things, not just in my sports life, but in my personal life as well. I hate this guy with a passion, but if they are going to go out and do a legitimate GM search, I hate that I'm saying this because I feel like every time they search for a coach or they search for a GM, it comes back to the same thing. This is the New York Football fucking Giants. Like, this job should be so coveted by anyone who's looking to make a name for themselves as a general manager, as a personnel guy. They're going to have a million really high picks this year. And if they go into the offseason with a mandate that the next guy has to stick with Joe Judge or stick with Dan Jones, and listen, if the new guy comes in and genuinely believes that those 2 are the answer, then fine. I'll trust it for at least a season. But these assets need to be used as a bargaining chip to bring someone in here who knows what they're doing and doesn't have a tie to the current ownership.
Yep, exactly, because they're not exactly walking into a very friendly cap situation either of them in the next few years. So that draft capital and everything, and just the name brand alone should lure a very good candidate in here. But like you said, do we even trust the guy to go outside his comfort zone and outside of the organization? I don't. But we'll see. Justin, I know you were saying something. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, just the screwed up thing about Jones, right? Because ultimately you can have all the draft capital in the world, and what it comes down to this offseason is how are we going to use that draft capital? Is it going to be used to move up for a quarterback, or are we going to stay put, just get the talented players? If anything, I feel like Daniel Jones is putting the Giants in somewhat of a good situation. If the Giants themselves feel like they don't want to force a quarterback, which I don't know about everybody else, but I don't want a franchise to force a quarterback just because a quarterback is there or a quarterback is somewhat of a position of need. I think quarterback was more of a position of need in 2018. and I would have been fine with going with anybody versus right now because I feel better about Daniel Jones in 2021 versus Eli Manning in 2018, 2019. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. But Snacks, you were talking about, not getting a fair evaluation of Daniel Jones, and ultimately it comes back to Garrett.
Well, that's how I mean it. Obviously,
I started talking about it before, and
So I was going to say, what also makes this so much more sickening is how glib Gettleman was when he threw in the jokes about window theory. When we're talking about Daniel Jones's rookie window almost coming to an end. In 2019, we were talking about, I was talking certainly with Justin and Nikki. I don't know if we necessarily knew each other by the 2019 draft, but we we were talking about the fact that drafting Daniel Jones right as we're finally starting to tear things down means year 3 at the earliest point is when we're starting to have a evaluation of whether or not things are working. And it doesn't make, and it's, here we are. It's year 3. We don't really know what's going on. We're on 3 weeks into and so here's the other thing that's the hard part. We're 3 weeks into the season. Golladay, who's our big ace, our big prize get, hasn't been healthy clearly. And and now just coming back and getting into the fold of things, and we already want to bail on Garrett. And I'm not saying Garrett's anything to be deserved.
No. Will, we wanted to bail. I'm telling you, Garrett was worth bailing on October last year.
Will's got a big hard on for Garrett in the offseason. Because he thinks that he.
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying. I'm on the fire Garrett train, but we're forced right now to be in a position to be reactive because every time we've had a chance to be proactive, instead we've relied on hope. We've said, let it play out, and not really let it play out, meaning this is the plan that we've outlined. It's still on track. It's the goals that we originally said we were going to get to. We're not getting them, so we're going to change the goals. In 2018 and 2019, John Mara defined the successes of the season as the playoffs. It was never a, this is a plan that's working. And now, and then all of a sudden 2020, there's a little bit of progress, and then everybody goes all in.
Yeah, it's fair. That's fair.
Who else is here? Do I see Pest? My friend is here?
Pest is here.
Hello, guys. How are we doing tonight?
Oh, wonderful, Pest. It's great to hear from you.
I mean, it's great to hear from you guys, but the subject matter is it's to be desired. We're in a hell of a spot, and I've only got a few minutes. It's unfortunate because I've got to go make content. But
you don't like us?
No, I love you guys, man. Here's the thing. I would love if we could do this on my channel, but we'll maybe make that happen in the future. And I've got to go do my podcast here in a little bit. But
Tess, did you hop on to advertise for listeners?
Wait, what?
Did
I hop on this advertising? You're goddamn right I did. Why the hell wouldn't I? What are we talking about here? Okay, it's the only logical explanation.
That's fair game.
But no, fellas, and ladies, because I'm sure there probably are some ladies in here. I've always been kind of the positive outlook guy in this community, right? I've got kind of a track record for arguing with a lot of you here on Twitter and saying, I like this move, I like that move. I think you're wrong about not liking this move or liking that move. And, at the end of the day, right, we're all going to be right sometimes. We're all going to be wrong sometimes. It doesn't really matter who's right or who's wrong because, let's be honest, none of us really know what the hell we're talking about here, okay? We're all guessing, we're all hoping, we're all praying and crossing our fingers, and some of us are going to be correct in some of our takes. It is what it is. We're in a position here as an organization where something needs to change, and I don't know if that needs to be coaches or play calling or playbooks or schemes, terminology, general managers. I really don't know what needs to change right now, but what I do know is something needs to change because this is probably the saddest state I have ever personally seen the Giants in, okay? And it's real easy to look back fondly on the Super Bowl championships that we've won throughout the years. If you're as old as I am, I remember all 4 of them. I remember the 5 Super Bowls we played, and I remember how heartbreaking it was for us to lose the Super Bowl. But it's nice to go back and look on those wonder years and those fond memories of Super Bowls. But that's the past, okay? And if we're looking at where we are today, it's a sad state of affairs, and something needs to change. Now, I've said talking to multiple people that we honestly need an outside look at this organization from top to bottom because there's something broken here. There has to be something broken here. This roster is so good, with the exception of a couple of pieces here and there, right? And I didn't expect us to win a Super Bowl. I didn't expect us to do anything mind-blowing this year, but I expect for this roster to be better than what we've seen for the last 3 weeks. And I will continue to preach and die on this hill that we have an absolute problem with execution. Okay, preparation and execution. We have talent on this roster, whether you like them or you hate them. Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones, whoever the hell else. But we have talent here. If I was coaching this team, man, I'd be so excited about what I could do. But something is wrong here.
So there's no debating any of that, and I think you're speaking to two people who are speaking right now who've both on their podcasts very specifically called for an outside evaluation of everything top to bottom, and nobody should be safe.
I just want to add something and Pest, I love you. That was a great rant. I agree to an extent, right? I'll give the perfect example. I thought that Alec Ogletree was going to come in here and be like a very serviceable linebacker.
I have receipts.
You do have receipts, and I'll own
What
that.
don't you have receipts of?
Yeah, exactly. Willie receipts, right? Like those type of evaluations, like no one's ever going to be 100% right, whether you're a GM or a podcaster. Like you're going to get things wrong. The only issue I have is since the hiring of Gettleman, the direction was just so obviously wrong. You're going to make mistakes in coaching hires, and you're going to make mistakes in player evaluations. But if you look around the league and you look at the most successful organizations, there are blueprints, and it's a copycat league. And teams go out there and they do certain things and they execute and they become dominant. And other teams go out there and say, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to do that, right? No one's asking the Giants to become Chiefs 2.0 or the Bills 2.0. But like the roadmap to at least to become those teams and that level is out there. And what upsets me the most is that the Giants didn't actively not even follow that blueprint or even attempt to follow that blueprint. They did what Will said. They were trying to get to LA and they actively drove east. And to me, like that's what's the most heartbreaking thing is that for the last 3-4 years, the direction has just been so obviously wrong.
Well, it's because we have this stupid-ass misconception of the Giants way because the Giants way led to the Patriot way. You know what I'm saying? So we look.
I get you.
We look at the Giant way and we go, well, look what Bill Belichick did when he took the Giants way to the Patriots. It can work, but like the league is different. The league has changed. The rules are different. It's obviously a league that is predicated on putting up points.
And Joe Judge's mentor, Nick Saban was talking about that.
Right.
And so, there's one thing I want to say, and I want to then just introduce somebody who just hopped in. Who I want to let give a word. You said, who you hate on the team. Forget about who you hate on the team, and you mentioned a couple guys. And one of the guys you mentioned was a guy named Saquon Barkley. And a lot of the people hosting this, excluding you, were some of the people who've been earliest and loudest in feeling very strongly that the pick of Saquon Barkley wasn't the best direction for the franchise. And obviously I'm one of them, but none of us hate Saquon Barkley. I think fans do hate Evan Ingram, but and I think there's nobody who's louder in saying that Saquon's contributions to the Giants don't merit what the Giants are investing in and setting an expectation of. And I, in my opinion, frankly, by setting such a high expectation for him, they're setting him up to fail. I mean, they're giving him they ran him to the ground in 2018, and I think and I don't think I'm worried about whether or not he can be the same. But just after trying to clarify that, I want to let Mo get any words in.
Mo,
hey, what's going on, guys?
Hey,
right.
we're miserable.
I want to harp next rule. I want to harp back on the point of fundamental problems with this organization, because at the end of the day, we're a handful of plays right away from being 2-1, talking about Daniel Jones taking the next step and all that good stuff, right? We go back to the Washington game, and we see Daniel Jones run a completely different offense that we haven't seen him run in a while. RPOs, read options, run pass options, amazing stuff. Honestly, that was probably the best game I've seen Garrett coach as a Giants offensive coordinator. And then to come back against a weaker opponent in most people's eyes, to not even run one read option, not run one RPO, something's wrong here, man. Something's wrong with the coaching staff. What are these people looking at? And that goes back to the earlier point where, like, there's something fundamentally broken about this organization. Because before last week, the offensive line wasn't even the worst issue so far this season, right? They're average to below average offensive line. They weren't the worst offensive line. Yeah, they don't run block, but they give Daniel Jones enough
The
time.
offense, the offense is in the middle of the pack of the league right now in pretty much
And they're
every
moving the ball.
category except for converting.
I think Justin posted something today about them moving the ball. They're getting yards. They're just not putting up points.
They're fifth in the NFL in yards per drive. They're sixth in the NFL in time of possession per
Makes
drive.
no-
They're
makes no-
20th. They're 20th in the league in points per drive. Yeah.
And even if you go back to the last 2 weeks, we've literally had Galladay get interfered with in the end zone and set up first and goal from the 1 yard line twice. You would think to run more of those jump ball type plays. That's why you got him. You know, and I just don't know what this offensive coordinator, I don't know what this head coach sees, because honestly, the way this offense is run now is on him. This is where we're entering game 20 of his tenure.
We're talking about what we're not running. I mean, you know, every time somebody runs through the backfield, it's like, you know, like from being lined up out wide, it's an end around that loses 7 yards.
It's
You know, it's not even like, okay, let's run Tony into the backfield and actually have Jones keep it. Like, wow, what if we take another defender away from Jones where he already usually has like a pretty open thing? Or let Saquon Barkley keep it. Like, you know, why don't we do something actively to pull something away?
You're so right, man. Like think about just motioning Tony in the backfield, having Saquon and Tony line up next to DJ, do like a read option or triple option speed out or something with them. Like you have so many options with these talented playmakers. You got Daniel Jones talented playmakers. You're just not scheming them open. Like how
you could even. Sorry, Mo.
Sorry, Nick.
No. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to go back to you talking about moving the ball at will against Washington. I understand maybe Atlanta's, you know, pregame for that or game plan for that. I'm going to go out there and at least try it. You went up and down the field all game against Washington with these same types of plays. You made guys open. Daniel Jones was put in a very good situation. You called a great game, and then you just do absolutely none of that. I myself, and I know there's others in here too, absolutely just we're worshiping Joe Judge, not based on a record, just based on a philosophy that we believed in and us thinking he's the right guy. He's very well spoken, all these things. But it's all this is on him too. If he doesn't have the power to get rid of his offense coordinator, that's clearly holding back the quarterback and holding back the offense, then that's a very fundamentally flawed system. But I don't even think that's the case. I just think he is right now being a coward. You see today, I texted Will, I texted Justin before, sent in the group. He had an absolutely miserable day today. The fact that he had to sit for 4 minutes explaining each little detail means he must be feeling or he's trying to convince us or convince himself. If you're going on and on and on about these little things so long,
when Joe Judge, I bought in head and shoulders to Joe Judge, and
I did too.
When he gave his initial, and I think I'm a lot more, you know, still with him than I think you guys are. But I'm going to talk very specifically because what I liked is he was very detailed and he was very specific in his expectations. So I'm going to be very specific in my explanations of which expectations he set that he's falling short of. You know, he talked about not forcing round pegs into square holes. I think we're all about to chorus with objections about the way the entire offense is run, you know, from Jones never even leaving the pocket. I mean, what I keep saying, what Jones is missing, first and foremost, that the best quarterbacks are doing that he can't do. I mean, he can make good throws with his arms and make good plays with his arms and legs. What he can't do is get off script like Dak did on that fourth down and make a play, you know, when something breaks down. And because we don't have
processing too a little bit.
No, I think you're completely right. He is a really, you know, so maybe, you know, who knows if it's Garrett or Jones, but we've got to find out that they figure out how to get the ball, you know, that they're, you know, purposely trying to get the ball out so fast, which I think is, again, a round peg in a square hole for a skill set like Kenny Golladay or Evan Ingram.
The thing with that, Will, is that they tried to use the intermediate and the quick game, but Daniel Jones is holding on to the ball in the top quarter of the National Football League. So it's been 19 games. And I'm slamming my hands and my fingers together at the same time. I don't know if you can hear it. 19 games of the same goddamn thing. And then, you know, you have the slimmer of hope that we saw against Dallas week 17, where it's like, okay, I thought that was a well-called game. The Philadelphia game last year, I thought was a perfect game by Daniel Jones.
Phil scored 27.
I thought it was a perfect game by Daniel Jones. And, well, you're right. We only scored 27 points. Daniel Jones had an 80% completion rate that game, and we only scored 27 points. A perfect game by your quarterback should result in over 30 points in today's NFL. So, you know, we've had 19 games of doing the same thing over and over again.
And what's the definition of insanity?
Yeah, it's the definition of insanity. We're making the same mistakes, and it's
doing the same thing and expecting different results, and that's exactly what we've been doing season after season. I mean, it's you know,
and if you want to look at the grand scheme of things, right? No matter what happens this season, right? If this turns into like a 3-14 debacle, whoever the GM is next offseason is entering a position of power that the Giants have not been in a very long time when it comes to the draft.
Well,
this is what I thought in 2018, and that's what broke my heart so much.
Biggest issue, and I'm not even trying to overlook 14 games. Like, I understand there's a long way to go, but I'm just saying, like, if Gettleman is gone, you got a new GM coming in. You look at the state of the Bears and that offensive line; they might be they might not win 4 or 5 games, right? Like we might end up with 2 top 5 picks. It's such a position of power.
Lunacy.
We're back in 2018. Forget the salary cap at that point. You have 10 draft picks. You have 2 top 5 picks. You can replenish this roster in one season if you do it right. It's possible. It can happen. But you need to make sure you make the right hires. And I think most people in this group can attest to the fact that no one really trusts John Mara to do that at this point. And that's the biggest problem.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think when people say that they look at the cap situation and they say, oh, it's going to be another 5 years before the Giants are good again. No, it's not the case. You could take some of the worst cap situations in the league and turn it around in 2 seasons.
Yeah, kick the can down the road, man. That's what everyone does.
Well, but what's important and what people have to remember is you don't just draft a couple really good offensive linemen and fix the offensive line. These guys need time you need some continuity. And I think we do have some, foundation in place to start building on. We didn't have that in 2018. And, that's, why I keep going back to that. But, we're talking about being 3-14. I think they're very different discussions. I don't think this team is as bad as an 0-3 and a 0 out of 17 win a game. I think we're going to win more games. There are going to be games where we overperform. We've underperformed probably in three games in a row when it's not the Washington game. Besides that necessarily being the point, we whatchamacallit, sorry, I just see your buddy Weiss is here. I'm going to invite him so somebody wants to come in. But I'm saying besides that being the point that we're not necessarily a 0-win team, we're still not good enough to be all in and fighting for a championship. I mean, maybe we could get a token NFC East going into the season, but we're not a team that's at the top, that should be putting all of our marbles in.
And it's so unfortunate because of the fact that they should have given themselves the opportunity to find out if they can get there in January. And it goes back, we talk about a flawed philosophy when it comes to the organization as a whole, right? Flawed philosophy when it comes to organization as a whole. And I think a lot of people talk about that when it comes to the NFL draft and decisions that are made over the offseason. But I think of it as, what I love to do is I love to look at situational football, first down pass rate, fourth down go rate. How aggressive are you on early downs? Are you using pre-snap motion? What personnel are you running? Are you running into stacked boxes? When are you running the ball? When are you passing the ball? All that stuff, explosive play data. That's the stuff that I look at all year round, where I think a lot of people here that you like to talk about, personnel decisions and stuff like that. And the Giants are fundamentally behind in that area too, where it's clearly Dave Gettleman. It's clearly, I think, this coaching staff too. But I thought the unfortunate part is I thought Joe Judge wasn't behind in that regard. And as long as Jason Garrett is still here, that has to be also my thought process is he's behind in all those facets too. And they're not giving themselves an opportunity to find out what this roster actually is when they have those fundamentally flawed things about how the game of football actually works.
But I think the right question is that a Garrett issue or a Judge issue? Because like I said, we're
it has to be a Judge issue at this point because unless John Mara
a Judge issue, 1,000.
Unless John Mara comes out and says that I was the one who mandated the Jason Garrett hire and I really coerced Joe Judge into hiring Jason Garrett, unless he comes out and he says that, which he never will.
He never will.
He never will. But unless he comes out and says that we have no choice as fans to put our head down at night and to put, for us to go to sleep at night, to think that the head coach is responsible for his staff, the general manager is responsible for the personnel moves, and the owner is just overseeing everything. Even if Mara does overstep his boundaries at times, we have no choice but to think that's how an NFL organization works.
But there's Judge is in his second year. And the Giants' dysfunction is a lot deeper than that. But Judge is in his second year. And, the Giants made the playoffs with Coughlin in his second year. But you got to give this guy a little bit of time to figure out what's wrong. Yes, I completely agree with you. Do they understand when, passing on early downs to a sufficient extent? No. Should they throw downfield more? Absolutely. I mean, there are some pretty no-brainer improvements that they can make. Fourth and short. Come on. And I think, we're talking about...
then what's the point, though? Where are the noticeable improvements in Judge's coaching from last year to this year that we can positively look forward to? There
awfully.
Well, I think right now it's Daniel Jones. And I think the defense, frankly, overperformed. So I don't think and we've all talked about pretty much the defense overperforming last year and having too high expectations for this year. And I think the defense might need some time to get back. And I think Dalvin Tomlinson feels a lot. We feel Dalvin Tomlinson a lot more than anybody expected to feel that. But I think the other issue about this coaching staff is I think there are too many voices in the room. There are too many cooks in the kitchen. I mean, you've got 4 offensive line coaches, which Jeff Schwartz was talking about, even though, I don't think any of us are huge fans of Jeff Schwartz.
Hey, Snacks.
And then you've got Amos Jones here, who's supposed to be like a, special projects advisor and, director of game management. The game management is atrocious. we were at the first game of the year, and the Giants had like 4th and 19, and they lined the offensive out, and it was a joke. I turned to my sister and her friend, and I was like, "All right, I'm turning around. I'm not going to watch this ridiculous charade. Let me know when the penalty's called." I mean, everybody knows what's coming, and as you guys said yourselves, Arthur Jones declined the holding penalty that would have made 4th and 3, 3rd and 13, because he knew that we would punt. It's just, we're a laughing stock. We're afraid of math.
Well, Weiss
So
has
am
been
I.
in here for a second, and I really want to say hello to him, and I want to hear how he's doing.
Hi, Justin. How are you? I'm doing good. I'm
I'm
just
great.
listening to you guys. You guys making great points. The thing about the whole Jason Garrett thing, right? Like, here's the thing. So we spend all off season, or at least I did, talking about, you got it. Like Joe Judge's influence is growing, and he has a large say, and a head coach for the Giants hasn't had this much of a power since Tom Coughlin. But then we can't just keep excusing, and I'm not saying we are, for why Jason Garrett is still here. Like, even if John Mara said, hey, I want to hire Jason Garrett, or I want Jason Garrett on the coaching staff, that's fine. But it's been a whole year, and we've seen what we've seen, and there's like nobody that can tell me that after 1 year, A, Jason Garrett still deserves to be here, B, Joe Judge doesn't have enough power to say, hey, I want to go in a different direction. So you have to blame him for that. So either A, Joe Judge looks at the offense and says, it's not, again, I don't need to make any radical changes like he says. And if that's the case, then that's a huge issue for him, and why when we talk about should he be safe, should he, go. And then secondly, I mean, you just look at his, like you guys talk about, you look at his decision making. Like, this is like, it's now 2 weeks in a row where his coaching decisions have cost this team games. Like, I don't think we can argue that, right? Like, his conservativeness has cost the Giants games.
Yep.
And so when that's happening, and then you look at the overall philosophy, and then you look at him today. I mean, I went back and I watched his press conference today. And I don't care about his whole thing about analytics. I don't really care about that. We can talk about that. That's a whole separate issue. But when you have to defend your coaching philosophy and your tendencies, like, you've already lost. Like, we can look at the history of coaches that have to defend themselves, and he did defend himself because he came in with, like, a packet of facts or talking points that he brought up to defend his coaching style. And to me, that's a problem. When you have to defend yourself 19 games into your tenure, like, history has shown us when coaches are in that same situation, it doesn't end well. So maybe he's an outlier. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe there's an improvement there. I don't know. But through 19 games, it's hard to be like, he deserves more time. Because ultimately, does he? What has he shown?
I couldn't agree more. I was saying that before. Why his responses to everything today were they just kept dragging, like he's trying to convince us, trying to convince himself. And that's, like you said, that's when you start knowing this is becoming disastrous. So
I will say though, I'm at a point, guys, and it's a sad point, because we're not even in October and the season's virtually over, right? But I'm at a point where I think I'm going to go crazy if I start micro-analyzing everything Joe Judge says in a press conference. If I start doing that in October and we're 0-3, I am going to go crazy. So really, I go back to the whole thing of, I am most mad at Joe Judge that he is keeping Jason Garrett around. I am most mad at Joe Judge for not adapting. He says adapt or die all the time, not adapting. Even if you want to keep Garrett around, put your foot in his ass. This is why Pat Shurmur was fired. Pat Shurmur was fired because he couldn't get control of his defense, not because of his ability to run an offense. He was fired because he couldn't control his defense. Put your foot in Jason Garrett's ass. And I know he believes these things. I know he does. At least I like to think he does, but he's failing in that regard.
Justin, I agree with you 1,000%. And it's like, again, the press conference today was disappointing, but at the same time, like, that's not what's going to turn me, you, or majority of the fan base away from Joe Judge.
Wins.
Actions speak louder than words. And it's not even just winning. It's, this offense sucks. We're going to make like wholehearted changes. They haven't done it. It's an offensive league. Like Will mentioned earlier, like, we were fully expecting, or at least I was fully expecting, the defense to regress at least a little bit, especially without the addition of a dominant pass rusher. But it's an offensive league, and he has taken zero action to improve the offense. And even after last week, where he's facing a defense that's giving up 40 points per game through the first 2 weeks, a team that we, as not even just we as a fan base, but I think the entire NFL is now mocking, because they basically pulled the 2018 Giants. They beat us, and we only were able to score 14 points. Actions speak louder than words. I don't give a shit what you say in the press conference. You can go out there and say that you can't win with an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah, like, that's obnoxious. But if you were to then go out there and actually have a pair of balls and go for it on fourth down, who cares what he says?
And I guarantee you, you're going to see it
this week at the 50-yard line. It's going to be 4th and 8. It's not going to be the situation to go for it on a 4th down, and he's going to force it.
And not only that, you know what he's going to do? He's going to throw a 40-yard bomb to Kenny Golladay just so that he can say he fucking did it.
They took a deep shot. Yeah.
Come on, man.
Killed two birds with one stone.
So I want to defend Joe Judge for a second, because I think,
Of course you do.
I do.
And Will, I
Has he?
want to preface this by saying, like, I'm not out on Judge, but like Ethan said, like, actions speak louder than words at this point.
No, there are two different points. Are there specific improvements that he absolutely makes? And yes, and we've talked about some of those. But at the same time, we showed a ton of improvement month to month last year, and he deserves a chance to do that with this roster as well. There are two different pieces of this. There's, is he getting this franchise better brick by brick? And right now, there's certainly a hiccup in the road that we could very well look back on this and be laughing in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But the other part of this that I think we have to keep in mind is we saw a little bit of light. We saw a little bit of sparks basically flashing last year, and we went way too all in. And we set way too high expectations. And I don't want Joe Judge to be the victim of unrealistic expectations.
It was that
like maybe
that Seattle win sparked everything. That's what it was.
Exactly.
Will, they also the organization did it to themselves.
I was going to say, Jeff,
by going out and signing Kenny Golladay,
But that's exactly my point. No, that's exactly my point. I think, they accelerated the timetable, and I really thought Joe Judge had the foundational control of the Giants. And I found an old tweet of mine. I talk about old takes exposed and bad receipts. I found an old tweet of mine from March where I was celebrating the Giants for being prudent and not making big free agency additions because they didn't think that they're one or two guys away. And then all of a sudden they're not, we're talking about spending $18 million on Kenny Golladay, but forget that we're spending $13 million basically on depth guys who barely are affecting anything.
Oh my gosh.
Devontae Booker, Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah,
Will was the number one Kyle Rudolph signing hater. He could not have been more right.
What a
that was just an atrocious signing.
And then we had a chance to really take it back. It's like, okay, everything, maybe he's too old. Okay, not only might he be too old, but there's also that, medical issue that his last team got rid of him so they could save less money than we're about to pay him because, they're worried that he's not going to be able to do anything. No, we do things with class. We are the classiest 15-36 organization. Jimmy,
I want to get Jimmy in here. Well, say great minds think alike. Jimmy, brother, welcome. You've been hanging out for a little bit. I appreciate you. What do you got for us?
Yeah, man, this is tough to be talking like this in week 3. I always think of myself as kind of being a little bit more of an optimistic fan compared to some of you up here. I definitely try to see things with a glass half full type approach, but the biggest disappointment to me has been Joe Judge this season. The lack of situational awareness he has during the flow of the game, not recognizing like what we all see sitting on the couch or in the stadium each week it's really disappointing. We kind of all knew how this game was going to go once we punted from the 39-yard line. I feel like we kind of seen the script. I mean, the week before we kind of saw it, and to just continuously do this over and over, it's really frustrating. And then I think the other thing that's kind of bothering me is his football philosophy is just, it makes no sense for a 39-year-old guy. It absolutely makes no sense. And then the more he speaks, the more I realize how quickly this guy got hired because of who he connected with in that front office.
Jimmy, I think it was you. I think you had like that amazing tweet yesterday about how he's the only 39-year-old who acts like he was a Vince Lombardi intern. Was that you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised we don't run like the wishbone, dude. I really just, his football philosophy and the way he talked about the field position and punting in that situation, it just like, it makes no sense how someone like that young and have been around the game for the past, 20 years of his life could come up with these decisions given our personnel. It really makes no sense to me.
I agree wholeheartedly. And just one point about the decision to punt on 4th and 3. Like, there were so many absurd things about that. Obviously, like the fact alone, I'm always a big believer in if you have that 3rd and short and you're in 4th down territory, like, bro, you just spent 2nd overall on a running back who's now quote unquote fully healthy. Like, you have been developing this offensive line for how long? Like, you have 4 fucking offensive line coaches. You have a quarterback that can move his legs. Why not just run it twice, back-to-back plays on 3rd and 3 and pick it up?
Yep.
Yeah, Ethan running it on 3rd and short and 4th and short. I mean, maybe not 4th and short, but running it on 3rd and short. According to the analytics, it's which I don't know if I fully believe all the time with this mentality. But 3rd and short is one of the highly suggested only times you're supposed to run the ball. So
well, the one thing that bothered me real quick about that play itself was the week before Graham Gano hits a 55-yarder, and I remember thinking to myself,
that too. Yep.
I remember thinking, I go, there was an opportunity. I don't have the exact situation, but I think it was like the second quarter versus Washington where we could have tried like a 55, 56-yarder, and we didn't. We punted. And then later on in the game when it was absolutely necessary, Gano hits it. The next week, we have the chance to kick a 56-yarder. And
It's the
we
same
don't.
exact situation.
And then
Yeah.
he comes out and says, "Oh yeah, by the way, when we're playing for field position, the wind was blowing at Gano's back." Like, doesn't that make the kick easier? Like, who does he trust on our team? If he doesn't trust
And
his
Jimmy,
offense, he gets 3
Jimmy,
yards.
let me stop you for a second, Jimmy. You want to know what's
And
funny?
just joining there, we were talking about the coaching decisions being coaching to lose in the Washington game. Remember, made all those long field goals, which even though we have a fantastic kicker, it's not necessarily safe to say that we're going to make every field goal that we take like that. And so that's when everything's working out. We're still not putting ourselves in a position to close the door. So it's not like we're talking about who's losing us the game. It's not like there's one guy who's losing us the game, but nobody's winning the game, and we're leaving other teams in positions to take the game from us year
Yeah.
after year.
I
Yeah,
want
I
to say
mean, everybody's talked about the margin of error, and Jimmy, but the whole thing about field position, you want to know what's funny? How Judge sat up there, and I think he even said it. Was it the Sunday press conference at which he said field position, or was it Monday's press conference? Neither here nor there. Doesn't matter, because the Giants' average starting field position during Week 3, it was the worst in the National Football League. It was the worst.
That was the funny part about all this.
It was the worst. So in Atlanta, they were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They had the 10th best average starting field position on Sunday compared to all 32 teams. So he sat up there and he said, we didn't go for it on 4th down because we wanted to win the field position battle, when they did the exact opposite and they were the worst team in the NFL doing it this past weekend.
I'm just waiting for Will to blame the long snapper.
I just want
No, I love Casey Kreider. I'm a Casey Kreider stan, and that's
Yeah, we know.
but that's partially because I'm happy that they finally addressed the long snapper when it had been deteriorating for so long. And
Let's get back on track.
Problem number one. Problem number one of this dysfunction was the long snapper. So.
No, but the
everyone
important point to make here, though, is that there's so much invested in special teams. And I'm fine with investing a lot in special teams if you're going to constantly get an advantage over it. But outside of Graham Gano making field goals against Washington, and he's only made at least one field goal in 1 out of the 3 games, what has his special teams created as an advantage? I mean, if we're going to punt from the 39, you better make damn sure you're going to down it inside the 5. We failed to do that. So, like,
Joe Judge is a special teams coach.
Exactly. And there are 3 special teams coaches on the roster, including Tom Quinn, who's got, as much leverage on the Giants as Saquon Barkley.
That's your boy.
My boy. I've had a rivalry with Tom Quinn on Twitter for the last 11 years. Since the Deshaun Jackson game.
I aspire to be like Tom
Before
Quinn.
the Deshaun Jackson game.
Can I tell you why I aspire to be like Tom Quinn?
Because no matter what you do,
Unlimited job security.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I could be so bad at what I do, which I mean is already debatable. I could be so bad at what I do, and I could still just remain employed and hang out. To
recap everybody on who we're talking about right now, Tom Quinn was the Giants special teams coach from I think like 2000, or I think right after the 2007 season, if I believe, because I don't think he was a part of that team, through the 2010 year when Matt Dodge couldn't hold on to a snap, and then obviously lost us the game against the Eagles. You want to talk about somebody who did lose us the game? That's you can certainly talk about that one. And for whatever reason, he still hadn't been fired. In 2010, actually, the Giants averaged fewer yards on their punt returns when you remove fair catches than their opponents did when you included fair catches. And I think the Giants had like the most fair catches in the league. Like this guy's
that is an insane stat.
It's mind-blowingly
that's almost
bad.
As insane as the fact that Evan Engram only has 2 career fumbles.
Yeah. But then after the Giants, so Ethan and I actually met the night of the 2018 draft, and I was joking about this earlier today. We took a shot together with optimism. Jimmy, you mentioned that, you're more optimistic than some of the guys here. I think some of the guys here who actually know me better know me as really one of the most irrationally optimistic fans ever. That's haunted by, in the moment, I'm irrationally optimistic, certainly, but I'm haunted by my inability to, I feel like, be irrationally optimistic these days. But we were toasting that it was finally the end of Tom Quinn, and now he's the assistant special teams coach. So the Giants have 3 former head special teams coaches on their roster.
Nepotism, man. It's nepotism. They don't move on from people they don't know. It's amazing.
All right, well, why don't we? I know Billy's been waiting, and let's get another.
Yeah, let's start bringing
question
some people
here.
in.
Yeah, I'm adding Billy as a speaker. This is all new. Twitter Spaces is kind of cool.
Thanks for everybody it might have to be a new thing.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for hanging out. Billy's connecting in here.
Justin, let me just compliment you. And you notice this from listening to the podcast. You have a great radio voice.
Oh,
you're like
best.
You're like a 23-year-old Steve Summers.
I mean, and especially for a guy who this is only a hobby.
Summers.
Yeah, Carl Banks said it's only a hobby. But I can do a good Steve Summers impersonation. I'm gonna get Jacob in here. Billy is still connecting. Oh, Jacob just went away. I'll get Matt in here. But I'm gonna do a Steve Summers impersonation. The New York Metropolitans are the greatest team in planet Earth, and nobody's connecting. What's up with all you guys? What's going on? But I appreciate it, Ethan.
There you go.
Wait, we have Matt's here. Matt, how are you, brother?
Unmute, Mac.
Matt.
My bad. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yep,
What's going on,
yep.
brother?
I'm good, bro. How are you?
Hanging in there.
How can you
Yeah, same,
possibly
my
be
guy.
good right now?
Well, I mean, not thinking about the season, but I just wanted to say I think it needs to be a whole reset, and that you can't bring in a new GM and have the same head coach. It doesn't work. And I'm
Agreed.
scared that he's going to forcefully bring in someone that's familiar with Joe Judge and just hire him off that connection. And it's going to be the same result as the Jerry Reese, or not the Jerry Reese, but the
No,
Pat.
but Matt, I get what you're saying. It's just the overlap of quarterback and head coach never matching up on the same timeline. And I'll say this, and we spoke about it like probably 20 minutes ago at this point. I am going to have a really, really tough time believing that if the new GM, knock on wood, that there is a new GM, comes in, who isn't Kevin Abrams, and says, yes, I am dying to play with Daniel Jones as my quarterback and Joe Judge as my head coach. Because just with everything that we know about John Mara and the organization, I'm just going to have, and everything that's transpired over the last 4 years, I'm just going to have right out of the gates an incredibly tough time taking him at his word.
Exactly, and that's it. So hopefully, I don't think there's no way Gettleman does have a job here. I remember Mara saying, like, this is it. Like, this is the year you got to show something or you're gone, pretty much. Not in those exact words, but I don't think
I'll
that's
believe
for
it when
him
I
being
see it.
there. Yeah, that's also another thing. And then him bringing in Abrams would be a whole nother issue.
So the one thing that I really do want to see is, there's a habit of the Giants have of not speaking during the middle of the season. The GM and the owner does not speak in the middle of the season, and they say, barring something extreme. And for whatever reason, benching Eli Manning after 2 games didn't count as something extreme, but that's neither here nor there. Maybe the bye week. This year, there's something
Didn't they
extreme
release
that
a
needs.
statement though?
They released the statement of confidence in Ben McAdoo, I think about 2 weeks before they fired him, and then they released like a statement of like, we're aware that there's a question of confidence about Pat Shurmur right before they fired him. But
So I have a question. So we don't count the run-in of Jordan Ronan and John Mara as an interaction and as a statement, and then we also don't count knocking over garbage cans as a statement.
I think it was Dunleavy.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
maybe,
Justin,
yeah,
let me
don't
just
maybe.
say that statement was incredibly prejudiced against chairs. You cannot forget the chairs.
That's very true. This is very true.
Ethan hangs on to the chairs like I hang on to 2018.
That's true. I do care about the chairs.
I don't think Garrett's going to make it till – I'm saying a division – if we lose to the Saints, which I believe we will, and then a loss in division to the Cowboys, if we get blown out that game,
That'll be it.
I think that's icing on the cake. I think that's it.
That
Yeah, I
actually
agree.
might where you see that might be where you see a GM firing too. But
I don't know if they'll.
But what's the point? You're 0-5.
Yeah, I don't think they'll get rid of
This
Gettleman in season. He's a company man.
and then it's so embarrassing that you can't fire this imbecile after an embarrassing 0-5 start where you spent all this money and all these high picks and did all these things and you still are that terrible and you're not going to get a head start on this coaching.
So I really
GM
disagree
search.
with that. I frankly think Gettleman's already out.
Go ahead.
I think the Atlanta game was basically the wake up call of not necessarily we're the worst team, but we're not the best team that we expected to be at this point. And we really there's no expectation that you can really say that we've delivered on unless you're saying there's a possibility that we found a franchise quarterback or a franchise left tackle.
Let me ask a question. I think Will and I have discussed this. I think Weiss and I discussed this on the podcast. I'll pose this question to anyone that's currently a speaker, anyone that's a listener that wants to pop in and answer. What scares you more? Leaving Gettleman as GM the rest of the season, or firing him and letting Kevin Abrams, who's responsible for a majority of these abominable contracts, get these contracts off the book and plan for the future? Which terrifies you more?
They're the same person.
Oh,
That's
wow.
the issue.
They're the same. I mean, Abrams is more of a cap guy than a talent guy.
And look at the cap. So it's to me like if Will is right, and Will has been right a lot, I'll give Will credit. And Gettleman is essentially powerless and has, whatever, then it might almost be better to just leave him there until the end of the season, as opposed to giving the reins to Abrams and letting him do all sorts of damage.
Is he going to trade a Jabril Peppers? Is he going to trade an Evan Ingram? Like, the season's lost. If you can get anything,
they should.
You would think. You'd hope.
I've been, for the same reasons. I think I think, Ethan, you've taken some of the words out of my mouth and some of the way that you've said Abrams has had his hand in everything that's really gone wrong over the last 18 years. And he could, for all intents and purposes, be a phenomenal mind. But whatever he's done, we could have lived without, because we really haven't gotten anywhere with him. And I think the risk of him having implicit bias for wanting to see some of the decisions that he's been involved with work out trumps really anything that he offers as a general manager. And, I've joked, if anybody's watched Silicon Valley, that he's like Nelson Spaghetti, who constantly fails his way into getting promotions and bigger job titles. But I think
that's an unreal reference. Very, very good reference.
All right, so I have a quick question for you guys. Like, if you had to quantify it, what percentage would you give that the Giants go with a bit of an outside hire for this new GM? Because I just feel like recently this feels like rock bottom, but it feels like the pressure is surmounting from the entire NFL media landscape. Like, this is not just like New York tabloids and New York radio anymore. This feels like the entire NFL media landscape throughout the country. You turn on NFL Network, you turn on ESPN, you turn on whatever, and the Giants are like a legit laughing stock, even more so than we kind of joked about it the last couple of seasons. Like, it's really hit rock bottom here. So it can make a radical change.
But before everyone answers, Jimmy, I want to answer your question with a question. When you say outside hire,
right? Because Gettleman was an outside hire, wholesale change.
Exactly. Zero connections to the Giants, or just outside hire being the bare minimum requirement?
Yeah, like Mark Ross.
I'm saying zero. I'm not saying like a Garrett or a Gettleman.
Right. So zero connection.
Family. Yeah, zero connection.
Oh, then 5%. 5%.
It's super
I doubt it.
In my head, it's super low.
I don't know. I think
honestly, I think the greatest thing that happened this past weekend was, to your previous point about us being an abomination, was the fans booing John Mara during Eli Manning's speech. That was the greatest thing about that game. That was a wake up call. If he doesn't wake up at that point, honestly, man, I don't know.
I think there's a chance with some connection as an ex-GM or whatever the case. But I don't think I think I shouldn't give him any credit, because he's definitely a bumbling idiot. But I think he finally realizes that he cannot. I don't think Abrams can be the guy. I don't think he could sell this fan base on.
It's not going to be absolutely not. It's not going to be Kevin Abrams.
If it is, MetLife Stadium actually may burn down to Bobby Skinner's request.
It'll be empty. It'll be empty next season, and that's a fact. It'll be opponents there, not
it's
Giants.
not going to be Kevin Abrams.
So I want to follow up this with one other question. Then I want to ask somebody who just joined us to start giving his 2 cents. But basically, right now, looking at the team at 0-3 and being so far away and having year after year of missed expectations. And Mike, I'll let you start with this because you're joining, and I know you're traditionally very positive, and I'm really excited to hear what you're thinking right now. But would you rather feel like you finish a season at 4-13 and have what Mara feels like he needs to shake everything up, or find yourself at 8-9, Evan Abrams still trying to make year 5 or the 3rd iteration of this plan, or however you perceive it, if you're a little less cynical than I am, work?
4-13, man. I want a whole. I need an organization. I need organizational stability at this point, man. It's 2 flash in the pan Super Bowls aren't enough, man. Like, that's
so. Well, that's funny that you kind of framed it that way, because this is what I wanted to chime in about. So let's assume this season continues to go off the rails the way it's going, and we all believe that a new GM is going to come in, and who knows what he's going to do about Judge or Jones or whatever. Right? But my question is, and we haven't talked about this, what do we do with Kevin Abrams, Chris Mara, Chris Pettit?
There you go. Keep going.
Great.
There you go.
Is that ever going to change? Will that change? And
that's a $1 million question right there.
John Mara's not firing his brother. He's not going to fire his brother.
Let's say he doesn't fire him, but he doesn't have him involved in personnel. He gets a different title. Like, I don't know. But do we want that to change? I mean, I do.
Of course, that goes back.
Everyone.
Here's the thing about Chris Mara.
How do you trust it? Even if they say that this person's title has changed, I can't trust that behind the scenes doing some shit we don't want them to do.
Well,
like
right, you would have to see it. You would obviously have to see success and change. But we could talk till we're blue in the face. Like, who's to say that John Mara would not allow, obviously we all assume it, but would not allow those things to change. And like, I'm at such a loss right now because I don't know where this is going. And for the most part, I like John Mara and the fact that he cares and that his whole life is the Giants and he spends and he's willing to spend. Now, he obviously most likely steps over the line and interferes and meddles too much and has his brother as the VP of personnel and was emotional with Eli and all of these things, right? And John Mara's not going anywhere, obviously. So,
No.
like, where are we going?
Well, you brought up Chris Mara, and that's the person I really want to talk about. Like, we talk about the GM, right? But to me, like, the issue is so much bigger than that. Like, outside hire, Kevin, like, understand Chris Mara's title, and this is directly from the Giants website. Like, you guys can go and see this for yourself. He's the senior vice president of player personnel. On top of that, if you guys go back to the offseason and pro days, he always had pro days. So, like, we're all smart enough here to put that together. That has a pretty large say in the Giants roster, whether it's drafting, whether it's free agency. Number one, he's also the owner's brother, and I'm sure he has an ownership stake with the organization too. That's number one. Number two, despite the fact that he's so heavily involved in personnel and roster decisions, because we see him at pro days, he never goes in front of the media. Like, who does he answer to? So if you have somebody that's constantly making mistakes or is a part of what has sort of been the debacle of the last decade with this team, and he never has to answer to anyone, or he never has to worry about losing his job or losing his title, that's where the problem lies. So you can go out and you can go and get, an outside hire. You can go and get all these guys that people mention all the time. But if you don't restructure your front office and you don't change up your scouting department and your player personnel department, can you really say that stuff changes, or is it just different seats at the table? Like, that's the problem. That's like when I always say, like, I'm a hopeless fan, because I've come to the realization it's so much bigger than just, hey, we need a new GM. We need to go outside and get a GM. We need to go and look at what organization X, Y, and Z is doing and try to copy that. No, it's like you have to look at top to bottom how this organization is being run, the entire front office. And when you have essentially he is a part owner of the team involved. Like, we talk about John Mara being involved. Chris Mara is heavily involved, and he really doesn't answer to anyone. He never is out in front of the media. To me, that's where it's like, okay, we need to start there, because it's so much bigger than just the GM.
I think that the worst part about being a Giants fan, legitimately, is they ruin football for the whole week. You cannot go out and watch the Giants game and then turn on a Rams game without thinking about how incompetent the Giants are.
It's a completely different sport. I swear, it's like watching a completely different sport.
It's amazing how different they are.
It's crazy.
It's so ridiculous that there's only one offense in the entire league that's even close to being as bad as we are, and that's Miami. And I think it's because of
the Jets, man. The Jets
you're talking about the Giants ruining your week. I mean, I'm sure there are people in this Spaces thing, whatever it's called, who've made fun of me for the Giants, ruining my spring. I mean, we've all invested so much into this team. We talk about how much John Mara cares, but I think there's very clearly a broken priorities in his in what he cares about. I think does he want to win? Yes, but I don't think he's brave enough to ask himself the foundational questions that will lead to success. And I don't think he's been brave enough to do this for a long time.
He's not willing to go outside his comfort zone. That's the problem.
And that's the issue. He's also not willing to let go of people he trusts. That's the other
So
thing.
he doesn't change the organization. So the question is, what's it going to take?
Maybe he's reached his breaking point. Maybe he's reached his breaking point, and he got booed. He's getting the James Dolan Wilpon treatment right now from his family.
Well, what he said in the 2019 town hall.
The Knicks are better than the Giants right now. It's amazing.
What he said in the 2019 town hall was a fan sent him a letter, and he said he reads the letters, and he said what the fan said was, you're James Dolan in a nicer suit. And I just want to let that sit for a second.
I mean,
he's not even James Dolan anymore. That's the problem. He's worse.
So much worse.
No. James Dolan is a horrible human being, and John Mara is a good human being who doesn't really know how to run a football.
Oh yeah. I'm not comparing them as people.
No,
James Dolan
cares
is a
what
trash
he's done.
person. Yeah,
I mean, no. Will, you're being too nice. He's actively stupid. Like this guy was born on third and thinks that he hit a triple. Like nothing is going to change within this organization. And I'll tell you, Michael asked it, like, what's it going to take? I'll tell you, it's going to take luck. They need to get lucky on an outside hire and just really fucking hope that guy is the guy. And I think Weiss and I spoke about it this week. I might have even tweeted it. I think that John Mara is legitimately, he needs a therapist. He is scarred from the Tom Coughlin press conference, and he is scarred from Ben McAdoo, as Ben McAdoo being like that outside hire that everyone was touting and telling him that he needed. I think he is legitimately afraid to go out there and try it. I'm hoping the last 2 seasons have been a lesson to him that, just because you fall off your bicycle doesn't mean you should never ride your bicycle, and that he goes out there and we finally get lucky with a hire, either front office or coaching, that's actually going to make a difference.
And I think if in terms of real change, just real quick, like we talk about real change, it's going to be him continuing to get embarrassed like he was embarrassed last Sunday. He was embarrassed. I mean, when you got 60,000 people booing you.
There's a Strahan retirement ceremony coming, man.
Yeah, it's like if he continues to get embarrassed, like
that's Strahan retirement ceremony.
Because the one thing I know he can't deal with, it's going to be bad. I mean, you just look at their schedule. I mean, you got to find me a game on their schedule right now between now and Thanksgiving where you're like, okay, I think we can win that game.
Maybe.
So I actually think the Giants are going to win this week.
Same, Will.
And I think I think the Giants are, every time the media is really at its worst of everything's going wrong, they're not every time, but it's like it's the opposite of like the Monday Night Football. Everybody picks one way, you go the other way. It just feels like, I don't think Jameis Winston as an 8-point favorite or something like that against a team that has really everything to prove is going to be as much of a lock as everybody else thinks it's going to be.
So
I
look at the
think
2017 version of the Denver
first
game
game back in the dome after a hurricane.
I understand. No, but look. You think the Giants are scared of a raucous Saints fan, after a life-altering event, a raucous Saints crowd after a life-altering event, or Giants fans booing them, them off the field? I mean, I don't think, with what they're dealing with at home, they can go anywhere.
I mean, rock bottom is rock bottom.
I think the loss of Blake Martinez is way more important than people realize.
I think what people aren't realizing is the fact that Jameis Winston's going to have 10 seconds to throw the ball, and that Daniel Jones is probably going to turn the ball over 3 to 4 times this game. This is going to be the game where he reverts back to regular Daniel Jones.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think
this game there's an avenue of victory. There is an avenue of victory. I mean, I don't think the Saints stretch the field that well, but I just don't see how the Giants are going to be aggressive enough on defense to make Jameis make those mistakes. I just think philosophically the Giants just don't blitz as much as we'd like them to.
They were pretty aggressive against the Falcons.
They were, and honestly, you're right. They didn't capitalize. Like they should have had 2 picks, right? Especially Adoree. Adoree should have had a pick, and that was the game right there. That should have been the win right there. But I don't know. I think Will's right, though. I don't think this matchup is as lopsided as we think. It's just the Giants are just they disappointed us so much this year that no one really has hope, right?
We're talking about what needs to change and what what's going to be the saw that I think we all agree that there's a foundational break right now in where the Giants need to be and what needs to change. And I think we saw that 4-game winning streak at the end of last year. And I was saying, and some of the speakers laughed at me last year, when we were 0-6 or whatever, for saying I still think we can get to 5 or 6 wins, but we can't necessarily get that one upset win, and as a fan start validating everything that every decision that's been made, like the Leonard Williams trade, for example. Let's talk about the Leonard Williams trade, for example.
One second, Will. I agree with you 1,000%, but you know that it's going to happen, especially from the people in the front office who are just sitting around a table by themselves.
We've got a lot of passionate
away from being 2-1. You know that a win over a team like the Saints is absolutely going to turn like that. Well, I think we're just a couple plays away from 2-1 to like that's definitely going to be the thinking, and we're going to be even further away from change.
But how many times do we say that? Every year it's like, oh, we should have won this game. Like we lose by a field goal the last 1 second of the game. We're a bad team and we always find a way to lose. I think that's an issue.
Well, building on both of those points, going back to the beginning, I mean, a lot of you have hit on a lot of the things. I think the most frustrating thing for me at this point as a fan is just the sheer predictability of a shitty thing to happen. Like I know Ethan tweeted about
the inevitability.
Ethan called that every week last year. Like here comes the back-breaking Dan Jones turnover, and fortunately that hasn't happened that much here. But like for example,
the Denver game
called.
I'm batting 500. I'm batting 500 this year. That's good enough for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but I mean, on the screen pass to Saquon, they gained 25 yards, and I'm immediately thinking to myself, "Where's the holding penalty?" Like it's a positive play. And my first thought is that can't happen. There has to be a penalty. It's just gotten to the point where we're almost numb to the heartbreak, which is, and the other thing is, which we were talking about earlier, the Chiefs scored 24 points last week, and it was considered a bad offensive week. If the Giants score 24 points, it's considered a miracle at this point.
Why can't we afford a holding call? Why can't we afford a turnover? The Chiefs had 3 consecutive drives against Chargers where they started off the game with a turnover, and they made it a 6-point game. Why can they afford that?
Is it? Justin, I'm going to put my thinking
Team
hat on.
personnel.
Wait, no, hold on.
Is
Ethan,
it
go ahead.
because of a lack of explosive plays? Plays, Justin? Is that perhaps the reason?
Ding, 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 ding. I host a fucking video every week where because of this football team is so bad at producing explosive plays, I actually take 3 minutes every single week in a video that I do that's called the Explosive Play Report, because it is a miracle where what we did against Washington, and I'm like, okay, can we sustain this? Can we keep this up? This is what a normal offense is supposed to be like. And then they regressed in every single way possible this past weekend against Atlanta.
I think the funniest part about the lack of explosive plays, and it's obviously not funny, is the fact that when the Giants on occasion try them, they're usually effective. They just completely abandon them. Like, beautiful 38-yard pass to C.J. Board in the first quarter down the sideline. Not one downfield shot after that. Just
it's a circular. It's a circular process. Outside of like really the game when Mark Sanchez started against us, or like with Josh Johnson, Saquon Barkley hasn't really been the superstar that he's been advertised to be without Odell Beckham. Like, that's really not discussed. Like, when we had that guy who defenses were worried about beating them downfield, it completely changed what the offense was potentially able to do. And when your running back is a home run type of guy who can't really be counted on to get 3 carries, have 3 carries, get 10 yards, and ground out a defense like that, like what are we doing? And it's foundationally broken.
Well, it's a flawed philosophy to
100%.
rely on a running back to fix your offense in a passing league. And the whole point of Saquon Barkley is, this is at least according to the fans, and probably when Dave Gettleman talks about Weiss, you shared this quote of Saquon Barkley makes our offensive line better, he makes our quarterback better, he's going to make our defense better. Well, what that means to me is they're going to stack the box against Saquon Barkley more, right? Well, Saquon Barkley's facing an 8-man box at 7.69% this year. Wayne Gallman faced an 8+ man box at 40% last year. That was the second highest in the NFL. I don't think defenses.
So that's 6 times more likely.
Yeah, I don't think defenses are fearing Wayne Gallman and they're stacking the box because they're fearing Wayne Gallman's going to break off a big game. And they're certainly not stacking the box against Saquon like I'm sure Dave Gettleman and this coaching staff thought that they would. So it's just sickening seeing how he's not been able to perform. And it's
Justin,
sickening.
one more thing that Jacob brought up, that it's that they see the explosive play that works and then they refuse to go back to it. I'll even add on to that. They see an explosive play not work, but almost work, where it's not totally ineffective, right? And I think the prime example was the first play that they ran to Kadarius Toney last week, where he catches the ball in space, made like 4 defenders miss, and picked up 7 yards instead of taking it to the house. And they say, okay, it didn't work. We're just not going to do that again. When really it was super effective and was very close to being an explosive play in and of itself.
Yeah. And you're not giving yourself an opportunity, but with the lack of attempts and lack of pre-snap motion to help the quarterback diagnose. There is no help for the quarterback in this system. There
Justin,
really isn't.
Hang on a second. So I know we've had a few guys recently join in. If you guys have anything else you want to add, would love to hear from you. Otherwise, we want to start rotating in some other people who are requesting to speak a little bit. So Jacob, Matt, Mike, Dylan. Anything else you guys want to chime in?
The last thing that I'll say is I would pay an absurd amount of money to just be a fly on the wall and sit in the offensive meeting rooms and just hear how Jason Garrett tries to rationalize the ineffective offense, because your sole job as an offensive coordinator is to put your personnel in a position to succeed. And Jason Garrett, week after week, minus last week, where the first time in his 19-game tenure actually put his position players in a position to succeed, and just completely regressed the following week. Like, I would just love to sit in that room and understand how he tries to rationalize the lack of success offensively and the lack of putting his best players in a position to succeed.
Jacob, there was a quote that Garrett had before the season that talked about pre-snap motion and why he didn't use it. And
a quote that Coach Garrett had.
Yeah, excuse me. What Jason had before the season, and what he said is, we run it. You just don't see it, basically. And you may not see this by watching behind the TV screen, but we're going no huddle and we're going up tempo. It was basically and I hate to have this kind of quote because it's not my kind of analytical take. It was I went to Princeton, I know what I'm talking about, you don't, explanation as to why I don't do something that I should be doing. I'm smarter than you. I'm the smartest guy in the room complex, which unfortunately our general manager also has too. I want to say hello to Monty, because Monty He still
Sorry,
is
Justin. Before we keep doing that, I want to give
man.
everybody else who's recently joined us a chance, because there are a couple other guys I want to include as well. So
okay,
Mike, anything, Jacob, Matt.
Really quick. I mean, just to the point of where we can't understand why they're not adjusting or why they can't see what we think we can see. It's these close games and the success between the 40s or the 30s, whatever. Football coaches are extremely process-oriented people. And if they think they're close and it's just a matter of we just got to clean up the penalties, we got to stop beating ourselves, but we're knocking on the door, we're right there, we can move the ball, they're forcing 3 and outs, it's just situationally we got to clean things up. Like, they're not going to drastically change their identity and their process because that's what they believe in and it's all they know. And
Mike, and I agree with you. I 100% agree with you because that is their mentality. Judge
Absolutely.
has, emphasized that it's about the execution. It's about cleaning up the little mistakes. But why that is such a flawed philosophy in today's NFL is, again, explosive plays. And I hate to just talk about the same thing over and over again.
But you're right.
But the NFL is a league of explosive plays. You produce it on the offense, and it's how you stop it on the defense side of the ball. And when you have these 10, 11, 12 play drives, somebody eventually is going to have a holding call. Somebody eventually is going to drop a pass. And especially if you're the Giants, when you have Evan Ingram and Nate Solder and all these guys on your offense that could cost you drives at times, it's going to happen. So that's why, again, you talk about the definition of insanity where, you know what, Mike, they are close. And you know what, Joe Judge, when you say it, you know what, you are close. You are a holding call here and there. You are a drop ball here and there from that not working. But also, there's 31 other teams that I feel are battling the same thing every week. Where on a 10, 11, 12 play drive, there's a holding call, there's a drop pass, something that alters the flow of the game. And that's just what the NFL is. And I don't know, even if the best coach in the world, I don't even know if he can defeat that in today's game. You have to produce explosive plays. You got to flip the game script a lot quicker.
Justin, I'll add to your point. Oh, sorry, Mike, you go.
No, yeah, I agree with you, Justin. I absolutely agree with you. It's for some coaches, it's hard for them, it's very difficult for them to pull away from their philosophy, their core beliefs. And that's the problem right now that I think that we're all seeing, is that Judge has only been here for 19 games or whatever it is, and he's not ready to make these, in his opinion, drastic, rash changes away from his core philosophy and core beliefs.
Yeah, so I think there's one thing that he said today, and I didn't hear everything he said. It sounded like he said a whole lot, and I'm looking forward to being able to go through everything. But I know one thing that he said is, in the Bill Gates line where he said it's not all about analytics and it's about playing to the strengths and weaknesses. I think there's real legitimacy there. But what I wish the beat really had him expand on is, all right, you're playing against maybe the worst defense in the league, and you have so much invested in your offense. Don't you feel like, with this running back that you're running your whole team around, and a quarterback who can pick things up with his legs too, and with your first round pick with another guy who should be shifty too, like, how is that not a strength that you're comfortable capitalizing on that, and what needs to change for that to be the case?
Yeah.
Justin, let me add to your point about explosive plays. Aaron Rodgers, prime time. How many times did we see him just say fuck it and throw a deep ball knowing that he was going to have his receiver draw pass interference? You can pick up yards that way too, and I feel like Joe Judge and Jason Garrett just don't realize that.
That's been the way that Kenny Galladay's been involved in the deep game.
100%. Not this year, but throughout the course of his career, he's been that deep ball. I got guys all over me. I'll go up and get it, and if I don't, chances are someone's grabbing something they shouldn't.
So the other thing about Galladay, though, that I don't think people are really talking about is, I think it's clear that he's not 100%, and and I think that points to some real process questions. I mean, Rudolph and Galladay, who are two of the real essential signings on offense, aren't 100%. Another guy where they brought in as like a contingency plan, John Ross, hasn't been healthy like he has been his whole career. So, last year we're talking about hurt guys stay hurt. And then this year, because we have a flash in the pan and we beat Seattle, all of a sudden we're all in on, whoever's available. And when we're raising our spending, when the whole league's tightening their belts, and rolling money into next year to be super aggressive, on guys who we can't even count on to be on the field at 100%. So,
here's what I'll say about that. If the organization is going to spend money, I'd rather them spend money on players like Adoree Jackson and Kenny Galladay, and John Ross has a $1 million guaranteed contract, so I'm not gonna harp on that. But I'd rather them invest in guys with high upside versus overpay for Nate Solder and Golden Tate. If they're going to spend money, spend it on talented players, and if you fail, then you fail that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean,
also, if Galladay, he's probably not 100%, obviously, but if he's out there, throw him the ball. Like when you have a single high safety and
Yeah.
somebody playing press man on Kenny Galladay, I don't care if he's not 100%. Throw him the ball.
They
I
run
feel like-
cover. Giants face cover one at one of the highest rates in the National Football League because teams don't believe in their ability to create explosive plays. And cover one is basically you're running man coverage down low with your 3 wide receivers when you're 11 personnel, and then you got a single high safety up top. And the Giants, they take advantage of it every now and then, but they just don't take advantage of it enough when they're playing cover one. And it's crazy how a lot of like the elaborate defenses they'll play cover two and they play with 2 high safeties, but not against the Giants. They certainly don't.
We take advantage of it to C.J. Borden and Darius Slayton. Throw Kenny Galladay the ball.
It's crazy.
So we have a couple of guys who just joined us, Monty, Carl, and Dirty Mike and the boys. If any of you guys have anything you want to get off your chests.
Got some great people here.
What's going on, boys? Pleasure to be here.
Monty,
Hi,
Monty, you have to introduce yourself properly. Who are you?
I'm Monty, commander of the SEALs Army.
There you are.
Yeah, commander. But man, I don't know. How do you guys feel as far as trust that there's going to be serious change if things continue to go bad after season? I mean, I think we can say Gettleman is gone if things happen, but my impression going into the season, good or bad, with Judge is that they hired a 38-year-old special teams coach to give him more than 2 years. Whether my opinion has completely changed so far this season, and it has, that he should be here. And then the fact that if he is here, like, what stops them from just doing what they always do and promoting Abrams? I don't want to be that guy and be negative, but I don't know. What do you guys think? What makes you guys think that's not the road we're going to go down?
Well, we spoke about it earlier. I mean, my confidence that that's the road they go down is pretty low. The team really hasn't given the fans any confidence that they're actually going to go outside for an outside person. And we spoke about it earlier, outside being a person with no connection to the Giants, a fresh brain to come in here and analyze what's wrong with the organization, because it's clear that there are some insane levels of groupthink that's just on in the conference room between John, Chris, Gettleman, everyone. And they just need someone from the outside. My confidence level is low. Until I see it, I can't believe it.
And I think that's right. But I think we also have to keep in mind, and a concern that I have, and it's hard to validate this because we don't know what's going on behind closed doors, is it didn't seem like it seemed like the Giants had interest in other candidates in going into 2020 at head coach, that they didn't really get their fair shot at interviewing. And I still love Coach Judge, and I'm all in on Joe Judge. Maybe not all in. I've mentioned some of my concerns, but I will take a lap after this because I'm not letting 0-3 change the enthusiasm that I had 3 weeks ago. And like I said, I still think we could be 2-1, but unless there's a real foundational shift in the process from the ownership, you're talking about Chris Mara, you're talking about Kevin Abrams and Chris Pettit and some of the guys who've been here a while. Who would come in here after the last 3 guys have gotten 2 years? You've got to really give a coach a chance to at least maintain the appeal of what's traditionally been considered one of the most prestigious jobs in the world.
That's dependent on how your front office is structured. If your front office is completely wiped out and you have a new foundation in your front office, and I'm not just talking about GM, I'm talking about from the top down, then then I think candidates, like you say, will be more open to the idea. But if you have much of the same guys, but you just have a different GM, then people might be hesitant. But in terms of like people always say change, I think that's all dependent on what happens with, like, between now and the end of the season. If we see a lot of the same from Joe Judge, it's really hard for me to say he deserves a 3rd year, regardless how the quarterback looks. Like, if they continue to lose games, which I think they will, and they don't make the playoffs, which I think they won't, and we still see the coach making the same mistakes over and over and still see the same conservative approach over and over, I think it's hard to say, like, okay, we can do a 3rd year. Like, if your reason is, like, he deserves a 3rd year because of what happened with Pat Shurmur and Ben McAdoo, that's not really a reason to me. You have to judge Joe Judge based on what you've seen the last 2 years. And if there's that big of a regression from year 1 to year 2, it's hard for me to say, okay, he deserves a 3rd year.
Yeah, I think the Giants need to be in a position where they're being proactive rather than reactive. And
exactly,
a lot of people, I've taken a lot of heat for, people said, oh, it's been 3 months since Gettleman was hired. Why would you fire him after Nate Solder, or why would you want to get rid of him after the Saquon pick? Let it play out. But even going back into the whole process of when he was hired, and they interviewed 3 guys from within the building who were a part of what they determined was a roster that was broken enough to get Jerry Reese, who had won them 2 Super Bowls, fired, and 1 guy from outside the building who never really felt like he had a huge chance.
Not only that, Will, the only guy that they interviewed outside the organization
was on TV.
Not just on TV, Justin, publicly stated that not only would he have drafted Saquon Barkley, but then he would have drafted Dwayne Haskins. The only guy that they interviewed outside the organization would have made the team actively worse than it currently is now, which is almost impossible.
That's a great point. But we didn't look at sufficient candidates. We didn't look at the real question of, is what we're doing working, or do we have to start over again? And what I've seen is for 3-4 years in a row, we keep relying on hope of maybe this year we're gonna prove ourselves right. And I think as long as there's that bias of maybe we can be right, and it's tough.
The last thing that I'll say, because I want to let some other people speak, and I know I've gotten to say some things, is I think when you look at the Giants and the lack of going in a different direction, I think the most frustrating thing for me is also just looking across the league. Like, look at the Browns. Obviously, the circumstances aren't exactly the same, but they had Myles Garrett, obviously a franchise pass rusher that you can build around. They appear to have hit on Baker Mayfield, and look at the change that they've made in the past couple of years. I mean, they're arguably a top 3 team in the AFC this year, and they were at the doldrums for the NFL for a while, even before the Giants. And yeah, while they had a couple years where they slowly built it up, they hired a general manager that people respected, but was kind of unconventional at the time. Andrew Berry from, I believe he was working for the Eagles at the time. I mean, not too many people knew about him. He was definitely considered an up and coming candidate. But for me, in order to see a turnaround from the Giants, it's not even the fact that they need to hire somebody that doesn't have any ties from outside the organization. It's just the fact that they need to make the slightest effort to try and do something different, even if it's not the GM, but let's say they made a change in the scouting department, or they took away Kevin Abrams or someone like that. Just taking one step from the status quo and differentiating from the things that have plagued you recently would just give me at least the slightest glimmer of hope. But the fact that they continue year after year to stay to the status quo and stay in the zone where they're comfortable, even though they've been perennially one of the worst teams in the league, is just really, really frustrating. And it's really, really concerning, considering I know all of you have said it, but it doesn't look like things are going to change.
No, I think you're making some absolutely fantastic points right there. I think
Jacob, you got to start your own show, YouTube channel, or something. Very well.
I think Jacob has a podcast.
Yeah, Justin, you're coming on tomorrow.
The one thing to remember with the Browns,
asshole.
That is one of the lowest moments of my content life, right there, Jacob.
Well, the one thing I do want to mention in all that, though, is there's a fine line between making a statement and throwing a scapegoat. And the Giants have been basically, in a way, scapegoating their way through a cycle of futility, really since 2013 when they let Kevin Gilbride go. And I thought, at the time, I thought Gilbride was the worst thing in the world. And obviously, it's not quite as simple as you pull somebody away who's not necessarily doing his job as well as you can, and everything else is working. I mean, I keep going back to this. Obviously, he didn't work at left tackle, but Eric Flowers is having a solid year right now at guard. And I know fans wanted him off the roster because of all of the bad plays. And there's the same sentiment right now in Evan Ingram. And before everyone bashes me for still being a fan of Evan Ingram, it's important to get a root and stem shift, not just something that says, okay, that's better, they care. And, I just want there's a difference between being placated and actually figuring this out.
Yeah, so I think that goes back to kind of where I originally chimed in, right? And listen, I still like a lot of things about Joe Judge, and I would hate to make a snap decision and miss out on a potentially long-term good head coach. Obviously, what he's showing with his philosophies on aggressiveness versus, being I can't think of the word conservative, is not ideal at the moment, right? But we've been talking about, you just make a change at GM. There's a lot of things that we have talked about and we have pointed out, but I don't think most of it changes with just changing the GM or even the head coach. Yeah, we might bring in a head coach who runs a better offense or is more aggressive, but if we really want big time change from the top down, you have to clean house. Pettit has to be gone. Chris Mara has to be reassigned. Then your GM comes in that you hire from the outside, and he hires everybody in the personnel department and his head coach.
I agree wholeheartedly. You need a top approach. A phrase that I've coined frequently: the fish rots from the head down.
And I think there's no debating from any of us that John Mara wants, his heart is in the right place, wants to see the Giants win, and he really cares about seeing the Giants win. But it seems like there is like I keep saying, there's a hesitance to be completely objective that should be terrifying. And I want to go back to what Kim Jones said at the end of the 2019 season when the Giants were figuring out what to do with Pat Shurmur and Gettleman, and it seemed like the Giants were planning on keeping Gettleman. And by setting the wheels in motion, what Kim Jones reported on NFL Network is he had reached out to members of the NFL of the media to do his bidding. And if the GM...
Kim Jones gets so much hate for just telling it how it is, and because she had an inside scoop with Odell, but nothing that she has said is wrong. Like, it's objectively correct.
The point here is when you have members of the media, and I'll say it like Ralph. I mean, Ralph Vacciano will actively move the goalposts from what he says from one offseason to another. He'll say, I think the Giants are going to go 9-7 and make the playoffs. And then he'll say, well, wait a second, who thought this was really going to be a one-year fix? And when Ralph starts circling the wag on one person, and in this case, he's doing it this week with Jason Garrett, it seems like as much as John Mara wants to get it right, he's more afraid of fans being against him, and he wants fans to see, okay, if we get rid of this guy, if this guy's out of the picture, everything's going to be okay. And we're not like Mike just said, we're not a scapegoat away. As much as we've had people fail in their individual roles, it's not just getting rid of them that's going to make the Giants what the Giants should be.
It's a tough situation. You look at the roster and you see some talent. You look at the salary cap situation. Now, granted, it's supposedly going to explode in a couple years, but there's talent on the roster, and there's still things you like about Judge. But obviously, something is not working. So, what do you do, and what can you do?
Well, Michael, you're so right though. Like, it's an issue of making the same mistake that they've made through the last two regimes. It's firing Tom Coughlin and keeping Jerry Reese. It's firing Pat Shurmur and keeping Dave Gettleman. You need a full reset. Everything needs to be connected, and everyone needs to be on the same page.
Well, in both of those cases, they fired. It's not just they kept part of it. They fired Tom Coughlin, and then the whiff of the Eagles interviewing our offensive coordinator means, okay, they hired him as head coach without believing him enough to let him pick his own quarterback. And looking back, his decision to bench Eli, which I hated at the time, wasn't as egregious as it was. Was it handled the right way? Absolutely not. But he couldn't run his team the way he wanted to. So you can't hire a coach.
And not to beat a dead horse, but it wasn't even the most painful part. Isn't even that he didn't want to work with Eli. It's that he tried to get Jerry Reese to trade up to get Patrick Mahomes.
Reportedly, and I know that's I don't know how sure we can be on that. We'll never know for sure what's behind closed doors. It would make sense given how McAdoo seemed to feel towards Eli, and just reading between the lines. But then the next part of that was, okay, we replaced Jerry Reese because he failed, and then we let a GM sell the notion of this team's ready to win now. It's you can't fire somebody for making a mess and then not let somebody clean up the mess before you start making promises. And I don't think, even every year we say, okay, we're fed up. Aren't we ready to finally win? Bruce Beck reported the other day, fans are growing impatient. It's not that we're growing impatient. We're restless to see a vision with patience. And I think, I can certainly speak for some of the people speaking now.
That's well put. Well, you got to quote that. That was well put.
Okay, I'll be tweeting it later. I know I've been talking probably too much. Does anybody else want to chime in? I'll mute myself for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, No, Carl, you go. Carl,
yeah,
you've been here
I was
for a
just
while.
going to chime in, and
Carl!
I guess, I
Good to
guess we need
see you!
if we're doing
Oh my
proper,
gosh.
yeah, we're doing proper introductions. I'm Carl. I'm Yingling's #1 customer. But,
the second best Carl in this.
Second best Carl,
by the way.
Yeah, definitely second best at football. That's for damn sure. I would say the only thing. So I understand the point of we fired Judge this year. This is our third coach now that we've only given 2 years of rope for. But it's like, dude, how can one coach waste 5 timeouts in a single game? Like that's wildly impressive.
I think it's insane that we've been doing this Twitter Spaces for how long, like an hour and a half, and we haven't brought up how awful Joe Judge's clock management is.
Like, it's, oh my God, because I don't understand how that's not like the first thing in the coaching hire interview is like, okay, here's an hour's worth of coaching circumstances, go.
It's not even that. It's that people on Twitter all the time go, oh, you think you're playing Madden, like you can't do this, like you're being a Madden GM. Like literally a 10-year-old that plays Madden has better clock management than a lot of professional coaches. And it's not even just Joe Judge. We watched Mike McCarthy stand next to the referee in prime time, and the referee just kept looking at him like, are you gonna do it? Like,
the ref
are you gonna
asked
call
him.
timeout?
No, the ref asked him, "Do you want to call timeout?"
Insane, and he just let it run down. But
and then look
point
at San Francisco against Green Bay the other day when they snapped the ball with 12 seconds left and they still have 3 timeouts with Aaron Rodgers on the other sideline.
But here's why it's bad for the Giants specifically, because if the Giants were more aggressive on fourth down, if the Giants produce more explosive plays, and overall if they put more points on the board, I wouldn't mind Joe Judge calling a timeout here and there. I wouldn't mind him calling a timeout when their defense is in the red zone and they're about to allow a touchdown anyway. I wouldn't mind it. But it's because every game is such a close game, and it comes down at the end. At the end of it in the fourth quarter, Ethan, they need those 3 timeouts because
we didn't talk about also the Thursday night game when we had a timeout and then a delay of game, and then we had a timeout and a too many men on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't
have
it.
When he called a timeout to save 1.5 yards, I just about lost it.
Are you talking about the punt?
The punt.
Yeah.
Well, in his defense, strictly speaking, from a punting situation, when you're backed up in your end zone, 1.5 yards can make a huge difference between getting the punt off and getting it blocked. Now, do you weigh how important the timeout is versus that situation? But in his defense, in that situation, when you're backed up and you already are short on distance between the center and the punter, another yard or another 1.5 yards can make a huge difference in the punt getting blocked or not.
And also, there's also a huge difference between first half timeouts and second half timeouts. If he's wasting timeouts in the first, and wasting's a harsh word, but if we're calling timeouts maybe unnecessarily in the first half, I don't mind it. But it's second half when the game comes down the line. That's where it bugs me a little bit more. But again, in terms of the hierarchical issues with Joe Judge, I'm considering his time management, especially considering because he's not a play caller, he's not an offensive play caller, he's not a defensive play caller. I'm considering the time management like probably third on my priority list right now. And again, Garrett is number 1, and not getting these players to execute and not getting these players to make plays. It's it's probably number 2 on the list too. So,
sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I was just saying I would agree with Justin.
Yeah, you go back to what he promises. We're not going to try to put our round pegs in square holes, and it's just you don't see these guys playing their strengths. You don't see like I think it would make sense to let Jones run the ball essentially until somebody shows that they can stop it, and nobody's really shown that they can stop it, and they just get away from that. And a lot of times when the run game's not working, I mean that would make a ton of sense. Or like we've been talking about putting Tony in motion through the backfield before you call a running play. Just throw some eye candy out there.
Yeah, that is a great point because there are a lot of ways, and there's somebody in this, live chat right now who could probably speak a lot better than this than I can. But there's a lot of ways in which when a running game isn't working, that offenses can still move the ball. And they drafted Kadarius Toney, I think, for that specific reason. Using him in pre-snap motion, getting him in motion at the snap. I love the difference between just pre-snap motion and then also looking at the percentages of motion at the snap because they're 2 very different things. Getting Toney involved with motion at the snap, they did it once against Denver on first down, and really the running game hasn't really been working at all this year, but they did it once against Denver, and they got a solid 4-yard gain on an early down, first or second down. That's the stuff that we need to be doing more often, and the Giants' excuse last year as to maybe why they didn't do it is because they didn't have the personnel, and frankly, I don't know if there's really anybody on this team that I want to be putting in motion at the snap and then just be kind of dumping him the ball off besides Kadarius Toney, and that's an easy way to get Toney involved where I don't really feel like he needs to know the playbook. It's not a timing route. So, dude, go in motion, get a running head start, turn around, catch the ball, break tackles like I know you know how to. So there are certain things that the Giants can do, not even counting Daniel Jones's legs, because that is especially part of it. Saquon Barkley had his most explosive play, 40-yard run, in a game where Daniel Jones's legs was also a threat, and Washington had to account for it. So it's very frustrating that they just run a very kind of conventional offense where we're gonna run power ball. We're gonna rely on our offensive linemen to win their battles, and it's not working. It's not working. There are other creative ways where you can get extensions of the running game, and they're not doing it.
So let me ask you a question, Justin. Do you put that more on the head coach or the offensive coordinator? And what I mean is that at what point do you say, like, okay, we get Jason Garrett is bad, but you're the head coach. Why does this keep happening?
Yeah, I put it on both. I think they both deserve equal blame. We have evidence last year that the Giants were, towards the first quarter of the season, were running a different kind of blocking scheme and running game than they were towards the second half of the season, and basically for 75% of the season. It was what the play that they introduced during that Dallas away game was Caden Smith as like this lead blocker. He starts at one end of the line of scrimmage, and then he's almost like working as a pseudo fullback, where he's pulling and he's like the lead blocker for whatever halfback is back there. And that has been the running play that is like the conventional running play that has worked the best for the Giants. And I do think, based off of evidence around the National Football League, Miami likes to run that. There's certain Bill Belichick disciples that like to run that play, and I'm forgetting what that play is called. But there's certain Belichick disciples that like to run that play, and the Giants adopted that towards the middle of the season last year. So that's why I think that's a judge factor. But still, nevertheless, the lack of creativity of getting your playmakers the ball and getting them the ball in somewhat creative ways, but not also simple ways, I put it on both, because Judge did clearly have some sort of influence on Andrew Thomas last year. Remember that whole talking point last year where Colombo was screwing with his right foot, and it wasn't until Joe Judge stepped in and he worked on Andrew Thomas's right foot. I mean, that was the talking point. So head coach is here for a reason. He's here to coach, and just because you have an offensive play caller and defensive play caller, doesn't mean that the head coach can't put his input in there and stick his foot up their ass and say, hey, you got to get this together.
That's a great point. Is like, we want to give credit to Joe Judge when good things happen, but they have scored under 20 points in 7 of their last 10 games. Like, that is almost, in today's NFL, that to me, that's I can't even imagine how that's even possible with how the game is played now. But with me, it's like, I know the answer as to why the Giants offense is bad. They don't have a good offensive coordinator. My next question is, why is he still the offensive coordinator of this team? And that's where I point at the head coach, because last year we loved to, myself included, I speak for myself, where it's like, I love to give all the credit to Joe Judge. I love to talk about the good things he's done. But now it's like, okay, we're talking about the bad things. And if I gave you credit for, like you said, with the whole Mark Colombo thing and fixing, quote unquote, Andrew Thomas's, feet issue or whatever, then I have to talk about this offense as to your role in it and why it is still as bad as it is. Why is it under your watch this keeps happening? Like that's where I'm sort of like, when I talk about Joe Judge and my frustration with him, is that, dude, you're the head coach. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is your staff.
Yeah, it's crazy that we're at a point where, we said the same thing about Pat Shurmur, except it was with his defense. There was why Pat Shurmur ultimately, in my opinion, why Pat Shurmur got fired is because he had a left tackle that was the worst in the game of football, and Nate Solder cost us games in 2019. Not necessarily the rookie quarterback had the fumbling problem, interception problem, but that's expected out of your rookie quarterback. And also, Pat Shurmur could not get a hold on his defense. He couldn't grab James Bettcher and say, look, there's certain things that you have to change about your defense. You're not aggressive enough. You have DeAndre Baker, who's like the best press corner in the country, and you're playing him yards off the ball. You can't be doing that. There are certain things that we criticize Pat Shurmur for that it's similar to Joe Judge, except Joe Judge is a lot better with the media, and he had a lot more fanfare kind of behind him from the start. So I do think Joe Judge is a better coach than Pat Shurmur, but it is crazy how what very well could be the end of both of their times in New York could wind up being very similar and ending for very similar reasons.
I think Dirty Mike and the boys was trying to speak not too long ago. We'll give him a chance.
Sorry to interrupt. First of all, hi. I'm Mo. I'm a perpetually depressed doctoral candidate, so Giants are not helping me. But to the whole Joe Judge and Jason Garrett point, Dan Schneider, he had a tweet today where he's quoting Jordan Ornan on his podcast, and he's talking about how Garrett wasn't even forced on Judge. He was suggested, but he wasn't forced. And Judge ultimately interviewed him and chose to hire him. You can't, and this is my point of view, you can't separate these two. If you have a problem with Jason Garrett and Jason Garrett's offense, you have a problem with Joe Judge. It's the same reason why we all want to Pat Shurmur fired, because we have bad coordinators. And if we're saying Jason Garrett's a bad coordinator, which he is, that's Joe Judge's fault.
Yeah, I think, Dirty Mike, you brought that up earlier. We were talking about this, is that we talked all offseason, specifically during the draft, about this is Joe Judge's influence. It's his hand in personnel. It's his hand in the draft. Why they're trading back. Why it's suddenly happening. Even if, let's say John Mara forced, if you want to use that word, Jason Garrett on Joe Judge, you're telling me that this head coach has so much say in personnel, but not in his coaching staff? Like, I have a hard time believing that.
So just to rewind for a second, just to I think we take a lot of these conversations for a lot of what we're talking about for granted, but for some people who might not follow some of the stuff as closely as we do, traditionally when teams hire a very young, unproven head coach, they hire one of their two main coordinators as a guy who really has a resume in the league. Like you saw that when McVay was hired in was it St. Louis or LA by the time when he was hired, but they had Wade Phillips as his defensive coordinator who'd been around the league forever. Mike Tomlin, when he took over in Pittsburgh, he had the veteran defensive coordinator in Dick LeBeau. So it's very process-wise, it makes a lot of sense that, you're trying this brand new head coach with a defensive coordinator he has a relationship with. All right, we're going to go with a guy who has head coaching experience, whom we have a personal relationship with, just to have an adult in the room to make sure that the boat doesn't get too rocked. That being said, if there is a philosophical difference, obviously it leads to a ton of problems. And what I have a hard time understanding is Nick Saban, who's obviously, Judge has touted as one of his mentors, has talked about how much the game has changed and how he's changed his philosophy to stay with the times. So you'd expect his protege, who's younger and more adept with technology and the newer trends, to be at least as up to date with current trends as Saban would be. And where's that
not
innovation?
even up to date, maybe just as open-minded, I would even say.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think, not only, talking about the fact that anybody who uses data would never use Excel because, big data would, it would crash Excel. But, that trite line, even as a big Joe Judge fan, didn't sit right with me.
If we get a general manager coming in here talking about R, the computer program R, I'm going to be pretty happy.
Do you think that Joe Judge even knows what Python is?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I don't. What is that?
Yeah, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Python is a programming language that specifically works with data sets.
Right. You know what? I really
Python is
appreciate you
more,
trying to but I don't give a shit.
versatile than that. R was built on Python, so if you learn R, if you learn one, you can learn the other almost immediately.
See snacks.
Whatever. I tuned that out real quick.
So I want to mention something that we talked about in just terms of how we set expectations and how we say, okay, this is somebody doing a good job versus somebody doing a bad job. And one of the more controversial moves that's happened recently was the Leonard Williams trade. I think a lot of the people who are speaking right now are very against the Leonard Williams trade because we saw 2019 Giants is not a team that was ready to add pieces, and we realized that. Basically, by spending the money that they did with bringing him in 2019, by tagging him in 2020, which upped his value, and by paying him the 3-year contract, if he ends up playing all 3 years, it's a total of about $90 million. Now, if Leonard Williams is actively really disrupting games like he did in the Seattle game last year, that's fantastic. But it looks like the Seattle game is the exception and not the rule. And when so many other resources have been invested in the defensive line, you just spent a second-round pick on Dalvin Tomlinson in 2017. You spent 2 picks in 2018 on defensive linemen, and then the next year you spend your first-round pick on a defensive lineman in Dexter Lawrence. That's how you put yourself in a position where, B.J. Hill was probably one of the 30 best Giants on the roster, but he still wasn't going to make the team because they had so much crowded depth at the defensive line, and because they were up against the cap, and by cutting him, they would save about $3 million, and a lot of the other guys towards the bottom of the roster wouldn't have given them that. So because the Giants drafted a guy who was good but not necessarily as great as they wanted to get, and they didn't have the patience to even let the guy they drafted develop, they spent 2 draft picks and $90 million on bringing Leonard Williams in, and half the time he's here, the team wasn't really competing for a division, for a serious playoff run. So nobody, I don't think any of the speakers here would say that Leonard Williams is a bad football player. But when we're saying it's a bad trade, we're looking at a significant investment in a guy where there was already a competent alternative that cost the team from being able to keep a lot of other guys. Like there are going to be some guys on the roster now that's already not good enough to be dominating, but the team's not going to be.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that Leonard Williams was preventing guys like RJ McIntosh and BJ Hill from putting up the numbers that he put up last year. And I do get, like, if you want to look at 2019 and the year that he was acquired, and you want to get on him for not getting sacks and not finishing, great. But the reason why I was against the trade to begin with, but the reason why I looked at what he did in 2019 and I said that the dude was going to have a good 2020 is because, at least in today's game, because quarterbacks are getting rid of the ball so quick in 2.5 seconds and less. It's so tough to generate a consistent pass rush in today's game because quarterbacks are getting rid of the ball so fast, but he was still generating pressure in 2019. So last year, Leonard Williams was 3rd in the league in QB hits. He was 5th in QB knockdowns. The guy who was 5th in the National Football League in QB pressures, Carl Lawson and Chris Jones had 44. Leonard Williams had 42. So the pressure that he put on the quarterback, it was there in 2019 on the 8-game basis that he played with the Giants. And then in 2020, with no edge presence, and a lot of people like to point out, Dalvin Tomlinson. Most of Leonard Williams' sacks came when Dalvin Tomlinson was off the field. So I'm going to look at that, and I'm going to criticize Leonard Williams' play this year. I'm going to criticize the trade. I'm going to criticize the contract because he's not performing in 2021, not because there were certain signs that we saw in the previous years where he wouldn't be a good player, because all the signs pointed to that he was going to be a good player. And I'm also not going to say, BJ Hill and RJ McIntosh and certain guys that we kind of pushed out of the building, that they would have replaced that production. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. But Justin, even from like a big picture perspective, and Will kicking this off the Leonard Williams talk in a very eloquent way, can probably go even more in depth than I can. But just from a big picture perspective, like stats and numbers aside, trading draft capital for a guy on an expiring deal automatically backed the Giants into a hole where they were going to have to.
Jones's legs was also a threat, and Washington had to account for it. So it's very frustrating that they just run a very kind of conventional offense where we're gonna run power ball. We're gonna rely on our offensive linemen to win their battles, and it's not working. There are other creative ways where you can get extensions of the running game, and they're not doing it.
So let me ask you a question, Justin. Do you put that more on the head coach or the offensive coordinator? And what I mean is that, at what point do you say, like, okay, we get Jason Garrett is bad, but you're the head coach. Why does this keep happening?
Yeah, I put it on both. I think they both deserve equal blame. We have evidence last year that the Giants were, towards the first quarter of the season, were running a different kind of blocking scheme and running game than they were towards the second half of the season, and basically for 75% of the season. What the play that they introduced during that Dallas away game was Caden Smith as like this lead blocker. He starts at one end of the line of scrimmage, and then he's almost like working as a pseudo fullback, where he's pulling and he's like the lead blocker for whatever halfback is back there. And that has been the running play that is like the conventional running play that has worked the best for the Giants. And I do think, based off of evidence around the National Football League, Miami likes to run that. There's certain Bill Belichick disciples that like to run that play, and I'm forgetting what that play is called. But there's certain Belichick disciples that like to run that play, and the Giants adopted that towards the middle of the season last year. So that's why I think that's a judge factor. But still, nevertheless, the lack of creativity of getting your playmakers the ball and getting them the ball in somewhat creative ways, but not also simple ways, I put it on both, because Judge did clearly have some sort of influence on Andrew Thomas last year. Remember that whole talking point last year where Colombo was screwing with his right foot, and it wasn't until Joe Judge stepped in and he worked on Andrew Thomas's right foot. That was the talking point. So head coach is here for a reason. He's here to coach, and just because you have an offensive play caller and defensive play caller, doesn't mean that the head coach can't put his input in there and stick his foot up their ass and say, hey, you got to get this together.
That's a great point. Is like, we want to give credit to Joe Judge when good things happen, but they have scored under 20 points in 7 of their last 10 games. Like, that is almost, in today's NFL, to me I can't even imagine how that's even possible with how the game is played now. But with me, it's like, I know the answer as to why the Giants' offense is bad. They don't have a good offensive coordinator. My next question is, why is he still the offensive coordinator of this team? And that's where I point at the head coach, because last year we loved to, myself included, I speak for myself, where it's like, I love to give all the credit to Joe Judge. I love to talk about the good things he's done. But now it's like, okay, we're talking about the bad things. And if I gave you credit for, like you said, with the whole Mark Colombo thing and fixing, quote unquote, Andrew Thomas's, feet issue or whatever, then I have to talk about this offense as to your role in it and why it is still as bad as it is. Why is it under your watch this keeps happening? Like that's where I'm sort of like when I talk about Joe Judge and my frustration with him is that, dude, you're the head coach. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is your staff.
Yeah, it's crazy that we're at a point where, we said the same thing about Pat Shurmur, except it was with his defense. There was why Pat Shurmur ultimately, in my opinion, why Pat Shurmur got fired is because he had a left tackle that was the worst in the game of football, and Nate Solder cost us games in 2019. Not necessarily the rookie quarterback had the fumbling problem, interception problem, but that's expected out of your rookie quarterback. And also, Pat Shurmur could not get a hold on his defense. He couldn't grab James Bettcher and say, "Look, there's certain things that you have to change about your defense. You're not aggressive enough. You have DeAndre Baker, who's like the best press corner in the country, and you're playing him yards off the ball. You can't be doing that." There are certain things that we criticize Pat Shurmur for that it's similar to Joe Judge, except Joe Judge is a lot better with the media, and he had a lot more fanfare kind of behind him from the start. So I do think Joe Judge is a better coach than Pat Shurmur, but it is crazy how what very well could be the end of both of their times in New York could wind up being very similar and ending for very similar reasons.
I think Dirty Mike and the boys was trying to speak not too long ago. We'll give him a chance.
Sorry to interrupt. First of all, hi. I'm Mo. I'm a perpetually depressed doctoral candidate, so Giants are not helping me. But to the whole Joe Judge and Jason Garrett point, Dan Schneider, he had a tweet today where he's quoting Jordan Ornan on his podcast, and he's talking about how Garrett wasn't even forced on Judge. He was suggested, but he wasn't forced. And Judge ultimately interviewed him and chose to hire him. You can't, and this is my point of view, you can't separate these two. If you have a problem with Jason Garrett and Jason Garrett's offense, you have a problem with Joe Judge. It's the same reason why we all want to Pat Shurmur fired, because we have bad coordinators. And if we're saying Jason Garrett's a bad coordinator, which he is, that's Joe Judge's fault.
Yeah, I think, Dirty Mike, you brought that up earlier. We were talking about this, is that we talked all offseason, specifically during the draft, about this is Joe Judge's influence. It's his hand in personnel. It's his hand in the draft. Why they're trading back. Why it's suddenly happening. Even if, let's say John Mara forced, if you want to use that word, Jason Garrett on Joe Judge, you're telling me that this head coach has so much say in personnel, but not in his coaching staff? Like, I have a hard time believing that.
So just to rewind for a second, just to I think we take a lot of these conversations for a lot of what we're talking about for granted, but for some people who might not follow some of the stuff as closely as we do, traditionally when teams hire a very young, unproven head coach, they hire one of their two main coordinators as a guy who really has a resume in the league. Like you saw that when McVay was hired in was it St. Louis or LA by the time when he was hired, but they had Wade Phillips as his defensive coordinator who'd been around the league forever. Mike Tomlin, when he took over in Pittsburgh, he had the veteran defensive coordinator in Dick LeBeau. So it's very process-wise, it makes a lot of sense that, you're trying this brand new head coach with a defensive coordinator he has a relationship with. All right, we're going to go with a guy who has head coaching experience, whom we have a personal relationship with, just to have an adult in the room to make sure that the boat doesn't get too rocked. That being said, if there is a philosophical difference, obviously it leads to a ton of problems. And what I have a hard time understanding is Nick Saban, who's obviously, Judge has touted as one of his mentors, has talked about how much the game has changed and how he's changed his philosophy to stay with the times. So you'd expect his protege, who's younger and more adept with technology and the newer trends, to be at least as up to date with current trends as Saban would be. And where's that
not
innovation?
Even up to date, maybe just as open-minded. I would even say.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think, not only, talking about the fact that anybody who uses data would never use Excel because, big data would, it would crash Excel. But, that trite line, even as a big Joe Judge fan, didn't sit right with me.
If we get a general manager coming in here talking about R, the computer program R, I'm going to be pretty happy.
Do you think that Joe Judge even knows what Python is?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I don't. What is that?
Yeah, you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Python is a programming language that specifically works with data sets.
Right. You know what? I really
Python
appreciate
is
you trying to
more,
explain, but I don't give a shit.
more versatile than that. R was built on Python, so if you learn R, if you learn one, you can learn the other almost immediately.
See snacks.
Whatever. I tuned that out real quick.
So I want to mention something that we talked about in just terms of how we set expectations and how we say, okay, this is somebody doing a good job versus somebody doing a bad job. And one of the more controversial moves that's happened recently was a Leonard Williams trade. I think a lot of the people who are speaking right now are very against the Leonard Williams trade because we saw, 2019 Giants is not a team that was ready to add pieces. And we realized that basically, by spending the money that they did with bringing him in 2019, by tagging him in 2020, which upped his value, and by paying him the 3-year contract, if he ends up playing all 3 years, it's a total of about $90 million. Now, if Leonard Williams is actively really disrupting games like he did in the Seattle game last year, that's fantastic. But it looks like the Seattle game is the exception and not the rule. And when so many other resources have been invested in the defensive line, you just spent a second-round pick on Dalvin Tomlinson in 2017. You spent 2 picks in 2018 on defensive linemen, and then the next year you spend your first-round pick on a defensive lineman in Dexter Lawrence. That's how you put yourself in a position where, B.J. Hill was probably one of the 30 best Giants on the roster, but he still wasn't going to make the team because they had so much crowded depth at the defensive line, and because they were up against the cap. And by cutting him, they would save about $3 million, and a lot of the other guys towards the bottom of the roster wouldn't have given them that. So because the Giants drafted a guy who was good but not necessarily as great as they wanted to get, and they didn't have the patience to even let the guy they drafted develop, they spent 2 draft picks and $90 million on bringing Leonard Williams in. And half the time he's here, the team wasn't really competing for a division, for a serious playoff run. So nobody, I don't think any of the speakers here would say that Leonard Williams is a bad football player. But when we're saying it's a bad trade, we're looking at a significant investment in a guy where there was already a competent alternative that cost the team from being able to keep a lot of other guys. Like, there are going to be some guys on the roster now that's already not good enough to be dominating, but the team's not going to be.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that Leonard Williams was preventing guys like R.J. McIntosh and B.J. Hill from putting up the numbers that he put up last year. And I do get, like, if you want to look at 2019 and the year that he was acquired, and you want to get on him for not getting sacks and not finishing, great. But the reason why I was against the trade to begin with, but the reason why I looked at what he did in 2019 and I said that the dude was going to have a good 2020 is because, at least in today's game, because quarterbacks are getting rid of the ball so quick in 2.5 seconds and less, it's so tough to generate a consistent pass rush in today's game because quarterbacks are getting rid of the ball so fast, but he was still generating pressure in 2019. So last year, Leonard Williams was 3rd in the league in QB hits. He was 5th in QB knockdowns. The guy who was 5th in the National Football League in QB pressures, Carl Lawson and Chris Jones, had 44. Leonard Williams had 42. So the pressure that he put on the quarterback, it was there in 2019 on the 8-game basis that he played with the Giants. And then in 2020, with no edge presence, and a lot of people like to point out, Dalvin Tomlinson, most of Leonard Williams' sacks came when Dalvin Tomlinson was off the field. So I'm going to look at that, and I'm going to criticize Leonard Williams' play this year. I'm going to criticize the trade. I'm going to criticize the contract because he's not performing in 2021, not because there were certain signs that we saw in the previous years where he wouldn't be a good player, because all the signs pointed to that he was going to be a good player. And I'm also not going to say, B.J. Hill and R.J. McIntosh and certain guys that we kind of pushed out of the building, that they would have replaced that production. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. But Justin, even from like a big picture perspective, and Will kicking this off the Leonard Williams talk in a very eloquent way, can probably go even more in depth than I can. But just from a big picture perspective, like stats and numbers aside, trading draft capital for a guy on an expiring deal automatically backed the Giants into a hole where they were going to have to pay him no matter what, or risk losing the trade. And just from the moment that the happened, right? Like, I know Weiss was a big Leonard Williams fan, and we spoke about it a lot on the podcast. But
USC Leonard Williams.
Yeah, exactly. USC Leonard Williams versus NYJ Leonard Williams. But it always was going to be a bad deal for the Giants from the second they traded for him. And to add on to that, a lot of the counter argument to that is, well, we want to see what Leonard Williams looks like in James Betcher's defense. Well, James Betcher's not here anymore. So, you know what? That entire point wound up being moot. But again,
and at the point of that trade, Betcher was pretty much a dead man walking too. So that did not make any sense to me either. And you saw what he did in 8 games. And if you liked it, why are you slapping the franchise tag and not getting a deal done there? You knew in that contract year he was going to explode. And he did. And then you backed yourself into a corner where you had to pay him, $8 or $9 million more a year, where you could have gotten the offseason before that when you made the trade during the season. It's just like everything just seems so ass backwards with the front office that makes me nervous that it's going to continue during this season. Are we going to win a few games like, this is losing, we're only a game out of the division? Are we going to trade one of those 3rd-round picks for a guy, an impending free agent, an over-the-hill veteran? That's what freaks me out the most about continuing the status quo going forward. So I'm an idiot. I'm well aware of that. But everything of that whole situation just reeks for me, and I have been a loud supporter of the anti-Leo
No, but
Williams.
but let me ask a question here. Let me ask a quick question. What
Make it
reeks of
quick.
it outside? I am going to make it quick. Stop interrupting me. What reeks of the Leonard? I understand the trade, and then you give up draft capital, and then guess what? Guess what the Giants did with that third round comp pick later that year? They drafted Matt Parrott, and Matt Parrott is a second string backup right now. So I get it. The optics of that are bad. But what is so bad about giving the contract to a guy where all the signs were pointing to that he was producing for you? And by the way, Leonard Williams had over 25% of the team sacks last year. So all the signs were pointing to that the guy was going to be good. So what is the
but it was one
bad
year.
thing?
But Justin, it was 1 year of sack production.
I mean,
but Justin, we're having a couple different conversations.
We are, yes.
Is is the defense better with Leonard Williams in a vacuum than BJ Hill? Absolutely.
Yes.
Is the defense sufficiently better with Leonard Williams than a guy like BJ Hill that it's worth what comes out to $100 million over 5 years plus a couple draft picks that may amount to nothing or may amount to another cheap guy who's under contract that allows you to spend somewhere else? That's where the real question is. And by making that trade, the Giants really had to be in a position where they continue, where Williams was a part of the long-term future. And there are two pieces of this that are really hard, because what Dave Gettleman took over, and when he said in the conversations in keeping Odell, what ultimately led to letting Odell go and letting Landon Collins go, is part of the general manager's responsibility is to eliminate distractions. And the Leonard Williams trade, and just how it doesn't make sense with what so many, with such established conventional wisdom, alienated the fan base. And I think it creates a distraction among the fan base when the best player, arguably, on defense, people question whether or not, bringing him in was really in the best interest for the team, or was the GM trying to save his skin in 2019 and avoid going 2-14?
I don't think the team is. I don't think the team is paying attention to like the distractions and the conversations that are kind of happening on Twitter and stuff like that.
Justin, I'll agree with you. I think that's true to an extent. But our good friend Dan, who's listening right now, just reminded us that Dave Gettleman did give a quote to the media where he said that if he didn't re-sign Leonard Williams, he'd get killed. So, yeah, they might not be paying attention to what we're saying in this Twitter Spaces or what we're tweeting or what we're saying on our podcast, but they're also sort of doing the opposite and going out to the media and just projecting the complete wrong image to the fan base. And I also want to let Carl, who was trying to speak before.
But one more final thing, and I'll shut up about Leonard Williams for a while because I defend him enough. Think of where this pass rush is without him, though. I mean, because it's already terrible. Giants are already ranked 25th in the National Football League.
So then they're still bad.
QB hits. Well, right. So they're not just bad. I mean, it is the worst, I think, without Leonard Williams. So, Carl, I'm cutting you off. I'm sorry.
No, the only thing I wanted to say is just imagine a world where he plays out the 2019.
Carl, you're muffled.
Am I muffled? Sorry.
There we go.
Okay, is that better? So the only thing I would say is just imagine a world in 2019 where he plays out the rest of that season and doesn't put up the sack totals, and the entire media is saying how big of a bust he is. He plays out that season and then he hits free agency. We're now the lead dog, and Dave Gettleman loves him. We're the lead dog, and he's tied $16 million a year for 3 years maximum. And then it's an absolute home run steal. That's what frustrates me about Leonard Williams. Is we could have had an absolutely amazing signing, whereas now we just got an overpaid defensive tackle.
And to be fair in that respect, had that, after the 2019 season, had that $16 million a year for 3-year deal been announced, I think many of us would have been initially against it, because until he proved himself in 2020, it would be a lot harder to really rationalize that contract. I think the contract looked like a deal in hindsight. So without that layer of certainty, it's really hard for the Giants to necessarily fill that end of that that bargain.
Yeah, I agree. Hindsight's 2020, but it's much better than what they did.
But what are we doing here, right? We're going back and we're talking about this trade and then the resulting effects after it. But we're going back and we're talking about the things we talked about a little while ago with the root issues that a lot of people have with the organization and the process and how they go about things. And I will agree with what Justin was saying, that if you take out, obviously, the nature in which he was acquired, what they did after that to sign him based off of his performance, it was the right thing to do. Now, we can continue to go back and talk about how he was acquired, but that's just basically going back and talking about the process of the organization, how they go about things, and how they have been going about things for quite some time. And we can just keep hammering that, but the only answer is that if we want that to stop, then they have to gut the organization and completely take a new approach, right? But that aside, if we're talking about this year, if we're talking about Joe Judge, if we're talking about this roster and things like Jason Garrett and the cap and this roster and what they now, obviously, I'm rooting for a turnaround and things go well, and hopefully that we don't have to completely gut the roster and fire the head coach and all that stuff. But if we assume that it's going to go that way, then what are we going to do? Like, what do you do with this roster? There's talent on the roster. There's dead cap ramifications if you're talking about clearing things out. Like, what do you do with Jones? There's just so many questions.
Yeah, it's worse than it was in, post 2017, right? When kind of Gettleman came in here in terms of all those contracts and big contracts and how many top tier draft picks. And, we always the big talking point when a new GM comes in and, maybe they move on from a guy that the fan base likes. Well, that just wasn't his guy. That just wasn't his guy. He didn't draft him, So, Mike, that's a great point in terms of, what is the new guy gonna think of? What's the new guy gonna think of Kadarius Toney, for example? You know what I mean? So it's tough spot.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that's scary of that, too, is you just see what the Jaguars just did. They drafted C.J. Anderson, top 10, turn around and trade him for what, like a third-round pick and a tight end? It's definitely, I mean, the ideal situation is this regime works out, but it's going to get ugly if it goes down the road we think it is.
They can also get out of some of these contracts. I think they're screwed next year, but after that, they can get out of a lot of these. They can clear a lot of money. And if you look at it in terms of, like, we talk about this Giants job that could open up. I mean, they have 2 first-round picks that could be top 10 picks, maybe even top 5. Who knows?
Yeah.
So
and that's hopefully.
This job is definitely going to be something that garners attention if there is a complete, like, rebuild and they're not forcing certain guys on people.
And you're hoping that, we talked about before about the Giants GM job is supposed to be one of the best jobs in sports in terms of upper management, right? Because it's the New York Football Giants, and you would hope that those 2 first-round picks is one of the prime reasons why you would want to take, that job. Just like in 2018, you had the number 2 pick, and a quarterback who's aging with possibly coming in here and bringing in your own guy. So hopefully a GM would feel the same way. It's like, I want those 2 first-round picks, and I want to turn this thing around.
Yeah, I mean, just hypothetically speaking, I'm just going to put this out there. Like, they can clear $13 million next year by moving on from James Bradbury. Now you're going to have a replacement, but they can clear space. It's just going to be a matter of how they do it, who they move. I'm just putting out there. So
because are we looking at like, are we gonna if we clean house to an extent, like as far as head coach, GM, staff, are we looking at 4 years, or are we looking at a reload like a 2-year thing? Like, what's the plan? And is the fan base going to have the patience for another 3, 4, 5 years?
The fan base will have the patience. Sorry to interrupt. But the New York Rangers, I think, proved that the fan base will have patience if management is honest about what they want to do.
Yes.
The New York Rangers management, they announced they're going to rebuild. They said they're going to sell off all these popular players that everybody loves, and the fans were behind it. People were okay with it.
That's literally what we've been asking for. That's what we've been asking
honest
for
like that. People would be behind it.
Yep. They should have done exactly, not actually send the letter out, but maybe formulate a plan and tell us that, and that should have happened 4 years ago.
The reason fans
if that was
are
the case,
patient,
this season right now would be probably much better than it's going.
Exactly.
Yeah, but 4 years ago, there was a lot of players on the roster that a lot of the fans didn't want. Right now, there's a lot of players on the roster that fans want.
So I was getting ready to chime in and ask the question. Hey, thanks for having me back. Are we legitimately saying that we think the fan base would be okay with another rebuild? Like,
yes, if it's done properly.
So Pest, here's look.
Will,
it's not.
You're cutting me off. I feel like we're on WFAN right now.
Ethan, take it over. I'm your burner
All right.
account anyway.
I'll
Yeah,
hang up and listen.
That's true. No, the only point is that the reason that we're impatient right now is because the organization was not patient back in 2018. We want a competent rebuild, and the fans, I think, for the most part, will accept a rebuild if done properly. I will gladly wait 3 more years and watch shitty football and just go through it all over again if I believe the organization has a plan, and it's a plan that is going to work for football in 2021, not going back in time like they've done time again. I think everyone here would agree that we will absolutely be patient if they want to blow it up and do things the right way for once.
I'm going to be completely honest here and say that I don't agree. Okay, I don't agree that this fan base can continue to be patient with bad Giants football at this point. So, like, the greater point is that there were a lot of mistakes made in the past, right? We can even the most optimistic Giants fan can admit that there were some grand mistakes made here. Okay, but I just don't know if I could say with confidence that Giants fans would be like, oh, cool, we're going to be bad for another 3 years. All right, cool. I'm just going to sit here and chill and wait. Like, I just don't know if that's.
Well,
So,
here's the thing.
oh, yeah,
I
okay.
get what he's saying, right? But you have to understand something. In 2018, they were in a perfect position to rebuild. They had a situation where they could move on from their quarterback. They had the number 2 pick in the draft. What they did was they didn't even start the rebuild. They continued sort of the status quo. They brought back the quarterback. They took a running back with the number 2 pick. So it was like nothing is really changing. It's just a continuation of this. They hired a GM who worked for the previous regime. It was sort of the status quo. When they actually started, quote unquote, tear it down and rebuild after the 2018 season, they took a quarterback, kept Eli Manning, and then they fired Pat Shurmur, kept Dave Gettleman. So they just never had a plan and sort of were making it up as they go along. Now, if they actually do it the right way and bring in a head coach and a GM, link them together, and they start retooling or rebuilding the roster, guys, it doesn't take 5 years. Look around the NFL. Teams are competing after 1 year rebuild. Teams don't even take a year. They're competing that year. This is not something like, despite what Dave Gettleman says, it doesn't take 5 years to build a roster.
Yeah,
you can do it quickly. And the Giants are going to have 2 top 10 picks, I believe. Like, they're going to be in good position. What they need to do is they need to figure out the quarterback situation. If they get that right, that will sort of expedite this process.
And the one answer I want to give, and then I'm going to invite a couple new voices in here, is, I think there's a false choice that's been presented as, and I think this is the choice that was that Mara interpreted in 2018, which was, do we want to rebuild this and really start over again, or are we tired of losing and are we ready to make the playoffs? And that's just a very, very dangerous and unproductive, and it's why we've been, waffling and not making progress, is because we haven't at any point said, okay, we're going to take a 3 or 4 year plan. I thought that was what was starting last year, and then we saw so much of 2022's money being committed to fitting guys on the roster in 2021. So, I think, you can't have a year 3 until you have a year 1. And I don't think it's going to be a huge rebuild because, like we've talked about, it looks like the left tackle's in place. If the left tackle's in place, we're going to get a lot more, it's going to be a lot easier to start developing the line than when, you have Eric Flowers, who is about to be cut in 6 weeks, which we were in 2018. But as long as ownership can be honest with us and not just say, wouldn't it be nice to make the playoffs? I think we're actually, moving in some direction. And I think we can start getting behind and uniting with the Giants fans.
You can't be hitting the reset button every 2 years, right? You need a plan. And what we saw with Dave Gettleman the last 4 years is just making it up as you go along. I mean, it's really been that. Like, every year, the direction's been different. We're going all in on Eli Manning. Then we're drafting a quarterback and we're rebuilding. Then we fire the coach. Then we bring in a new coach. Like, it's so much different directions. Now we're going on. Think about this for a second. The last 2 years, the Giants have been heavy spenders in free agency, right? And what do they have to show for it?
Well, I don't really consider them. Sorry, and Craig, I'll let you jump in a second. But I was just going to say, in 2020, it wasn't as much spending in free agency as they were replenishing. Like, yeah, they spent a lot of money on Blake Martinez, but it was replenishing the Alec Ogletree contract that didn't work. And they spent a lot of money on James Bradbury, but that was replenishing, the Janoris Jenkins, deal that obviously stopped working when he said the wrong things on social media, among it with everything else. But I know we have some new voices in here, so I want to give you guys a chance to be heard.
What's up, gentlemen? How is everybody?
Craig.
It's so great to hear from you.
Hey, what's going on, man?
I was going to be quiet and sit in the background, but you know me, I've got a big mouth. The first thing I wanted to ask is, let's define patience. You guys have been going on for 15 minutes about, will the fan base be patient? Let's just deal in reality. What are you going to do? You're going to stop going to the games, buying the gear? That kind of stuff doesn't happen on a wholesale approach. It just doesn't. You're still going to go to the games. You're still going to complain about it just like I do. We're still going to pump out great content. So I don't know what you're defining as the fan base won't stand for it. We're all going to stand for it. It's a business, and we've decided to, hitch our wagon to this team. Okay, I'm just saying reality-wise, guys, we all have problems. What's going on? I can go on, and I do. But the fan base doesn't have a choice. You're either in or you're out. So as far as will the fan base take a new rebuild? Well, if there is one, you have no choice. You're either in or you're out. The second point is, and I've always kind of been pretty staunch on this, is, Mara loves this team. He wants it to do well. They tried 2 years with McAdoo. They tried 2 years with Shermer. I don't think he's going down that road with another 2-year coach. Right now, we may find that they're making a lot of improper decisions, but they're trying to stick by this guy. He's young. He's been endorsed by Belichick. He's been endorsed by Saban, and they're going to let this guy do it. Even with a 5-win season, he's not getting the axe, because if he does, I have to disagree with that other, that other host that we can build a team in a year. It's very rare to build a team in a year. Can it happen? Yeah, sure. But if you sign on for new GM, new quarterback, new coach, it's another 3 years of losing. And I don't know anybody on the planet that's signing up for that. I know someone said, "Oh yeah, I'll take 3 years of bad football." Come on, man. No, you won't.
It's not 3 years. It doesn't need
I know
to
you
take
keep
3
saying
years.
that. I know you keep saying that, but not many teams in the NFL, 32 teams, there's not many teams that build a championship team, or we wouldn't have the New England Patriots winning 6 Super Bowls. These teams don't win because it takes time, and it's a business. Some guys work out, some guys don't. You want to depend on these 2 draft picks? Those 2 draft picks could be busts. You don't know. There's a lot of moving pieces, and economics runs the NFL. It's not like who we think and who this guy thinks. It's a huge puzzle piece that you have to put together. And one piece is wrong that doesn't fit, it sets off a chain of other things that don't fit. When you make one bad signing, you got to make another bad signing.
No.
Craig, that's what 2018 was, right?
And that's what bad general managers do. That's not what competent franchises do.
Then we're going to have to say that most of the GMs in football. Excuse me.
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
In 2018, when Arizona took a quarterback, right? 1 year later, they took another quarterback, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take them to sort of turn things around? Were they contending a year
3
later?
years. They stopped.
They didn't take them.
It took them. Exactly.
No. We're talking about 2 different things. We're talking about a championship team and contending.
The Cardinals aren't a championship team.
They're not, but are they contending?
Team.
Are they
And the
contending?
Cardinals are probably the best division in football.
I don't know. I don't think. I mean, Kyler Murray's a nice QB. I'm not wowed by the guy.
Kyler Murray's damn near elite.
That's fine. I'm not here to say who's great and who's not.
What doesn't wow you about Kyler? Are we sure that this isn't Dave Gettleman's burner account? Because the Giants were the only team that didn't have Kyler as QB1.
That's got to be Ethan talking, right?
Yeah,
that's what I figured. So what we're talking about is, 1 is what patience is, and 2 is that they're not getting rid of Judge. They're gonna let him build it at least 3 years.
Judge is acting like he's kind of coffee right now.
I don't know what he's doing, and I have no opinion on what he's doing or what he's not from an attitude standpoint. I'm just making a point that no one's signing on from management for another 3 years. Okay, that's not where they're going to go. And the new football 2020, 21, 22, the head coach has a say. They're letting the head coach, have a GM that understands his vision. They may give Judge an opportunity to bring in a guy that has the same vision as him. So, it may be, I don't know if you want to consider that not top down, but you don't know what's going to happen. You just don't. I mean, now.
I think there's two ways to get this. When we talk about contention, right? Contending, I think a lot of that falls on whether or not you have the right quarterback. And right now, that question, I think, regardless how you feel about Daniel Jones, it's not fully answered yet. But if you can get that question answered and you can get that issue resolved, that goes a long way in determining how long your quote unquote rebuild goes. Yeah, if you don't find the right guy, if you don't have the right quarterback, of course it's going to take a long time. I mean, you need a quarterback in this league. if you
Jones
get
isn't
one,
holding you back right now. I mean,
I'm
you
not.
don't have
I didn't
Jones
say.
isn't
I,
holding you
I
back
didn't.
at
I'm
all
not,
now,
no,
man.
no, no. Guys, I'm not saying he's holding anyone back. What I'm saying is that question hasn't been answered yet. Like it's been answered in Arizona. Like
I
it's been
know.
answered in with the Chargers.
I
So
know
when
Isaiah's
that
been trying
question,
to speak. I want to let him get a chance.
okay.
My fault.
Isaiah, what up, man?
What's going on, Will?
Thanks for on me. Appreciate you joining.
Yeah. No problem. I'm not one to block people. I was just tired of hearing the Saquon and two thing, but I do agree with y'all, but I feel like it's kind of one of those things that's been beat to death to a point. But now but now that this whole thing is kind of just revealing itself, and I did agree with y'all, but I'm just like, dog, let's see what this year brings. Let's see what this year brings. I get your point, and I don't agree with y'all. I mean, I was on the Rosen and Josh Allen bandwagon just as much as anybody else, and I still think Josh Allen was the right decision to make in the end of it all because how good Josh Allen's been in Buffalo, despite his slow start this year. I mean, yeah, taking a running back at number 2 is pure negligence, and I don't think anybody's ever going to disagree with that. But it's like, okay, so what have we learned from 2018? I don't even think Saquon Barkley being taken at number 2 is the most egregious sort of thing right now. I think you're probably taking DJ Hill or maybe Will Hernandez at this point because you know how excited we were when Will Hernandez was drafted because we thought Will Hernandez had first round potential, but Will Hernandez has been downright dreadful, and BJ Hill he was taken right before Fred Warner, so that's been that. I mean, the bad drafting just shows up in so many ways in the 2018 draft. I mean, and then Lorenzo Carter, we were kind of excited about that because he had ability to be molded into a decent pass rusher, and that just hasn't materialized, because he has an Achilles tear. I mean, there's a lot of things I have to say because this 2018 draft, the 2019 draft is getting a lot of shit because Daniel Jones had a lot of questions and Dexter Lawrence had some questions too. Because I mean, why would you not? I mean, I understand not taking a defensive tackle at number 17, but Dexter Lawrence hasn't been that bad. I don't think that's just my personal opinion on it. But like trading up for DeAndre Baker in the first round was kind of that was a brutal one too. That was a brutal miss for the Giants. And when your best draftee in like 2.5 years is Daniel Jones, and this is no diss to the kid because A-Ball's my dude, but that's a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Isaiah, there's nobody from the 2018 draft class that deserves a long-term contract extension that's outside of 1 or 2 years, and Will Hernandez is really the only
I agree with you.
he's the only player that deserves maybe a 1 or 2 year deal. You don't feel confident giving any kind of substantial amount of money to anybody else, and Gettleman was the guy that kind of always said, it takes time to evaluate these kids. It takes 3 years for really to see how draft picks kind of play out, and well, we're in year 3 and 4, and you're looking at the draft class, and this is the year. This is the year that's coming up. Besides Saquon Barkley, who has a 5th-year option, this is the year for these guys to get their contract extension. And certainly, if they negotiate anything big for any of these players that are left, I'm not very happy with it. So.
They need to take the bubble wrap off of Barkley.
Well,
Barkley's
Barkley
progressively better from every time I watch him play. But that's my
he
personal
does.
opinion. But
They need to give him carries. He's got to.
I want to ask a question to everybody, and because I think I've obviously been very vocally against the pick, and that's very much besides this point that I'm gonna try to make. There have been studies in the NFL that have showed that in the end of game situations, being down 4 actually makes a team more likely to win than being down 3. Because when they're down 3, sometimes teams play for a field goal and then push. And by putting exactly, it creates a desperation, and you see
makes them more aggressive.
Exactly. That coaches aren't necessarily always going to act in their best interest, and they need that external pressure making them more aggressive to force them into their own best interest. So with that same preface and saying that people won't do the best thing because of this, I'm concerned that Barkley is right now a net negative to the team. And it's not his fault. I'm not going to say it's his fault, but I'm saying there's such a desire to let Barkley make something happen and to keep 4 touches, where if it were a Wayne Gallman or an Alfred Morris, they wouldn't really be thinking that running back needs those same type of touches, that he's getting touches. And more often than not, I understand that running, you've got to have a balanced offense, but more often than not, it leaves the team in a less likely situation to score. And basically we're wasting downs by giving him the ball when he's not ready to go hit the holes at the way that a replacement level running back would. So I want to ask you guys what you think about this.
Well,
I think that's crazy.
Well, I would like to ask Justin a question because he could probably speak to it a little bit more. Here's a crazy idea. Why don't you use the pass to open up the run and make life easier on your running back?
I'm sure a lot of people would disagree, and this is part of the whole. And I could be wrong, but I like to think that I stare in front of my computer screen all day looking at this stuff, and for a reason. And really, what running the ball in today's NFL is you have to do it situationally. There's very few teams in the National Football League that can just run at will. The Giants are not the Baltimore Ravens. The Giants are not the San Francisco 49ers,
Absolutely
even though
not.
they want to be. The Giants are not the Tennessee Titans, even though they want to be. So those are the teams that I feel like Dave Gettleman has tried to build around as the years have gone on. But also, what do those teams do? They produce explosive plays. When Ryan Tannehill came and took over for Marcus Mariota, that's when that offense really started to open up. And ironically enough, that's when Derrick Henry became an all-pro player, when Ryan Tannehill was under center, not necessarily Marcus Mariota. So I think the deep ball, those offenses that also can produce explosive plays through play action, that therefore opens up the running game because you have less guys in the box and there are better opportunities to get positive plays in the running game. Those teams, the Browns do a good job of producing explosive plays in the running game, but also it's just a matchups game, and that's really what the NFL is just in general. It's a big matchups game, and the Giants just don't know how to play that, especially this Jason Garrett offense when it comes to running the ball.
Not at all.
They don't have a backup running back either.
Our backup running back is getting deemed inactive last minute after paying him $2.5 million this year. So that's the problem. That's another big problem to have. And
you don't have a back to offset.
Bad, poor decisions. You don't have no back to offset. And what back do we have to offset? Gary Brightwell? When we could have had Trey Smith in the 6th round? It's just all these problems are like problems. The snowball effect. Like snowflake, snowball, throw it to a snowball, roll down a hill, gather snow, and once you gather these little small flakes of snow, it becomes an avalanche. It's like a big ball of problems, and it's just like one little small thing turns into this big compounded problem, and that's the problem with this team. Whether or not we disagree about what happened in 2018, or we just don't want to talk to somebody, blah blah blah. So, at that point in time, no matter what side of the fence you're on, or if you want to keep talking about it, not talk about it, be positive, be negative, be like, yeah, I told you so, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because we're all in the same boat. We all see what the problem is, and it all stops at the top. And a lot of people were talking about how, we lose all these games and turn over what happened, and then Dave Gettleman comes in, and John Mara gets some old bullshit ass speech about, we looked outside the organization because Dave Gettleman was the GM of the Carolina Panthers. I'm like, bro, he was in the organization for 17 years. What are you talking about? You see, as long as the Maras have too much of a hand in the football and just stop being owners, then the problem is going to continue, no matter who's the coach, no matter who's the quarterback at this point. So, I don't know if y'all agree with me on this particular stance, but I think it just starts from the top.
I think you're perfectly describing a broken organization.
Yeah.
It is. It's an absolutely broken organization.
Sure works for the Cowboys.
It does it though? Does it?
It's working for them finally.
No, it doesn't. The Cowboys got lucky. They found Dak, and without him, they're just as bad as us. And they're not even true contenders.
Literally.
Well, when we bring up a team like the Cowboys, when we bring up a team like the Cowboys, right? Because I always hear this kind of stuff. When we're talking about the Cowboys, we're talking about some of these teams that are like perennial playoff teams, right? Sure, the Cowboys are a perennial playoff team, but they're not winning championships. So do we want to just have a bunch of winning seasons, or do we want to win championships? That's the question that needs to be asked here. Because
we want to contend. That's what we want to do. We want to contend.
We want to contend. A lot of people are cool with winning championships. The thing with the Cowboys, that's all you can really do.
The thing with the Cowboys specifically is that they've been contenders for the playoffs in recent years because the NFC East has been so bad. They've never been as good as the top tier teams in the other division. The only reason they make the playoffs is because our division is so terrible.
Right. So I don't know, man. I'm not saying that school of thought is incorrect or wrong or anything like that, but when we're comparing ourselves to some of these other teams who are always have winning seasons, sure, they always have winning seasons, but they're not winning championships. Isn't that the point? And I know you have to get in the playoffs.
Of course, it's the point.
Is it? Because I'd rather win championships than
win
10 games and get booted in the first round of playoffs every year.
If you make the show, you never know who's going to go, right? How many times these teams, you got to get in the show, man.
Well, you don't. Okay, cool. Well, the Giants, and I know, right? We don't really give a shit about the past, and I get that. But the Giants made the show with 9 wins. So, what do we want? Do we care more about winning a bunch of games every year, or do we care more about putting it together and winning a championship?
Well, in order to win a championship, you have to win games. We want the Giants to win games so they can put themselves in position to contend for a championship.
So
only one team a year wins a Super Bowl, so we're trying to put ourselves in that position of being one of those 6, 7, 8 teams that are contending for a championship.
And not just that, but set yourself up for long-term success so that it's not just a one-and-done thing, right? You don't want 2016, but you're not always going to be the Chiefs, right? You're not going to be the Rams with Stafford. You're not going to always be that dominant team. So yeah, you got to just make it and then see what happens sometimes. But you want that long-term success. You want that sustained success.
And that's the point. That's the point that I'm trying to make is that when again, I'm not saying that anybody is wrong in that thought process of comparing us to a team like the Cowboys. And I know they were brought up because Jerry Jones is overly involved, but I don't know. I'm beginning to think that we need to get away from this old way of thinking that we have as an organization. And I know that John Mara is not a Jerry Jones. I know that John Mara is not, always in the football operations or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But we've got to start thinking new.
So Pest, I want to hear if you agree with me. So there's not going to be a single team that is going to be the only championship caliber team. The Bucs won the Super Bowl last year, but there were other teams where the GM could certainly say they built a championship caliber roster. I think you could say that certainly for the Chiefs. Yeah. I think you could say that certainly for maybe the Rams not with Goff instead of Stafford.
You can say about Baltimore, Green Bay. I mean, you can say for a lot of teams.
A lot of teams. Yeah, a lot of teams.
So
Buffalo. I mean, the list goes on.
So right now we're 0-3, and I don't think we're the worst team in the league. But I don't think we're in a position where where we've shown anything that could let somebody think that we're contending for a Super Bowl. And I think, if you're not contending for a Super Bowl and you're deciding to spend $4.5 million on this year's cap, and if he's cut $2.5 million next year, or if he's not cut $7.5 million next year on Kyle Rudolph, who's not, who his last team just got rid of, and he's not really a part of the offense, it seems. And I understand he's getting back, he's getting back from an injury. But if you're going to do that thing to make a team that's not quite ready better, then it means you're not going to have the resource you want to make a team better in the future. So when we talk about a rebuild and we talk about having patience, it's saying the Giants have been basically kicking the can down the road since 2016, since the season that they got OV, Damon Harrison, and Janoris Jenkins. And I really don't think until all those bills are paid, which we got close to doing last year before we doubled down essentially this offseason, we can really feel like we have a financially healthy roster where we can both make a run in the playoffs and be in a position to keep the guys who are the impact players for future deals. So that's kind of what we're talking about in wanting that sustained success, where we have enough of a foundation and we can still keep the guys who are part of things. I know Jamie just joined. Sorry.
Hey, Will, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
If Dexter Lawrence doesn't go off sides or Darius Slayton makes that catch and we're 2-1, are we even having this conversation right now?
No, we're probably not having it right now, but we might be having it in 5 weeks after this gauntlet of teams we have coming up.
No, I understand. I'm just my point is that this team, if you go back to the Carl's teams and Lawrence's teams and all these other teams, they always had a superstar. And I was talking to Spiro about this today that we're always 2 plays short of winning, right? Like the ball never bounces on our side. We missed this. We got a holding call here. We're offsides here. We're always 2 plays short. I mean, the team is built with some really great football players, but there's no bona fide stars. Those stars make those 2 plays that help you get over the hump. We can never get over the hump because there's really not that guy where it's a bunch of role players. It's a bunch of really good football players. If we had 2 plays go our way and the team is 2-1, we're not talking about this. Now, we're definitely challenged. I think maybe it was Ethan who said it. We're challenged the next 5 weeks, no doubt about it. But people would feel better about the organization if we right now were at 2-1. But we're not 2-1 because we just don't have the absolute horses we need. We've got a really good constructed, team, but you still don't have that elite playmaker. I think Sims said it the best today. You need someone to make a play.
Craig, you're absolutely you're right in this regard. But, you mentioned the penalties and we're a few plays away from being 2-1 and, winning some more football games. And we talked about it a little bit earlier and, some other people made the point, but the problem with this team is that there's no margin for error. There is no margin of error. And it's because this offense doesn't score points. This is an offensive league. Football is now an offensive sport. And if you don't score points, you don't have a chance.
I mean,
we can't afford You can't afford a Logan Ryan, 2 dropped interceptions.
No.
Both of them were tough catches. You can't afford a Dory Jackson to not catch a ball in the end zone. You can't
Exactly.
afford Ben Bredesen to have a false start or a holding call because it delays a drive. You can't afford. Every time Daniel Jones commits a turnover, it's the end of the world. And that shouldn't be. That really shouldn't be. So we can't afford it because this offense just can't produce points and it can't put points
Well,
on the board.
You do have to ask yourself, Justin, like, the new game plan started the game off with screens and hands off to the fullback. We have 2 fullbacks on the roster. We held a healthy scratch with Booker. We're handing the ball off. We're running 8-yard curls, and we're running screen routes. I mean, what happened to throwing until this franchise will throw the ball down the field? If you're going to lose anyway, please show me what you got. Tony needs to be on the field. Rudolph needs to catch the ball. Galladay needs to be the hot route. Like, I mean, I'm not saying Garrett is the end all be all, but for the love of God, I mean, just go for it. Just go for it. I mean,
yeah, I'd rather lose. Craig, that's a great point. I'd rather lose when Daniel Jones is playing to his strengths, when Kenny Galladay is being given more than 3 opportunities in 3 games for contested catches.
Yeah.
I'd rather lose when we're using Saquon Barkley in the receiving game. We're trying to get him into space because clearly Saquon Barkley has trouble when he's limited in space. So let's get him in space. Similar like we did against Atlanta with those little dump-off passes.
Yep.
Jones did a good job of checking it down. I'd rather do all those things and lose rather than, hey, Daniel Jones hasn't thrown an interception literally since last year. And last time that he threw an interception, it was off of Evan Ingram's hands. Before that, he hasn't thrown an interception since the Tampa Bay Monday Night Football debacle.
Yep.
But I'd rather fail and not look for these little nitpick positive points. I'd rather fail trying our best and utilizing our players to our strengths rather than just being conservative and losing points just because it looks flat out bad.
That's the best damn point that I've heard all night, and that's what I've been saying this entire time. It's like, yo, push your damn chips to the table and try to win. If we lose because we went for it on 4th down and we were aggressive, I can live with that. I can live with that all day long. But if we're playing scared, if we're playing to not lose and we lose anyway, then what the hell was the point in the first place? Like, that's what pisses me off the most, is like, there's no aggression here. There's no sense of urgency here. There's no anger here. Like, these teams, this team right here should come out like this Sunday. This team should come out and should be murder someone on the field because of what's going on with this team right now. And if they don't, that's a problem. Like, this is football we're talking about here, okay? This is a gladiator sport. So when you're out there on that field, you should be wanting to kill someone. You should be wanting to rip someone's head off of their body and throw it into the stands. And I don't know if anyone feels that way right now. Whether it's a coach or it's a player.
Damn.
That pisses me off. Like, when I played football, I wanted to commit a murder on the field. Why is no one feeling like this right now?
Well, you're running curl routes and you're handing off to the fullback.
Yeah, let's all right, let's get Jamie in here because Jamie's been waiting to speak for a while. Jamie, what's going on?
When I played football, I didn't want to commit a felony, but I get what you're saying. No, I really think that something that Carl Banks was talking about it on the postgame show about finding that alpha guy and finding that leader. They don't have. I haven't seen anyone stepping up in the last couple of years to be that leader since Eli left. And I mean, not on the defensive side of the ball, not on the special team side of the ball, not on offense. You're not seeing someone kind of stepping up, talking to the media and kind of putting themselves out there and showing it out there on the field. It's just kind of like we have a lot of good players, but there's not that many. But you need that great player. You need that T.J. Barber.
Got to draft
You got to draft them. No, I know. And you can't get them in free agency because those teams don't want to lose those types of players, right? So you got to find that. You got to find that. I don't know what that X factor is, but whoever's evaluating the talent, whether it's Chris Mara or whoever it is in the front office, when they're coming to that consensus and they're talking to those people, they always talk about the certain. I'm losing my train of thought there, but like. You need that someone. Yes, you need that someone that can step up and be that leader to rally the guys that the guys are going to want to look up to.
They got to make plays. They got to make plays. You need to draft a guy that can make plays. We don't have the playmaker you're looking for. That alpha dog has to make plays. We're
So,
losing.
Greg, you took the word out of my mouth. That alpha dog, and Michael Strahan has spoken about that in the past, like around the time of the Leonard Williams trade, that there isn't a dog on there had been a dog on that defense, and a line that I've used a lot really since the Odell trade, as we've been talking about, the direction of the Giants, is I say there's a real fine line where, composure becomes complacency. And I don't think the players in the locker room are okay with losing. But I think the Giants are so scared of that line and so scared of people saying something out of turn and embarrassing them that they get guys who are quieter, who aren't going to make a scene on the sideline. And, when I was at the games in 2015, Odell would be as pissed off as some of us are when things weren't going right. And, obviously he didn't always handle it the right way, but he would be riling up the fans in the stadium when the rest of the team was disinterested.
You
and
want guys that hate to lose.
He had the fire, and he had the fire. He had the drive. He had the leadership. Yeah, he messed up a bunch and was kind of an idiot at times.
There's no forgiving what Odell did with the interview. You keep those concerns in house. But what he said about the interview, he said exactly what we've been saying all this entire group chat for the last 3 hours. The Giants need to throw the ball downfield. Like, it's not like he was saying, like, I need to be selling more jerseys. He was saying,
but Will, you can't defend that interview. Like, I understand you agree with some of the stuff he said, but the whole premise of that interview was really, really bad. And I can't, as much as I was a fan of Odell, after that interview, I really, really, really had a tough time defending him. Like, I understand.
Gotta be team first. Team first.
Yeah, you can't. 6 weeks after the Giants give you a contract, you can't go on national TV in an interview and question whether or not you want to be a part of the team. Like, that's not leadership.
I completely agree with that, and that's, I think, I completely agree with that. But I go back to the Giants failing Odell as much as Odell failed the Giants. And if you're saying you want guys to hate to lose, the two guys who made the most of a stink when the 2018 that Dave Gettleman team, the 2018 team that Dave Gettleman inherited lost, seemed to be Odell and Landon Collins. And you can't say that you want guys who hate to lose when those two guys are let going, and Eli Manning, who's obviously worth his place in history is it can't be debated. But when he could be saving the team $17 million a year, and you're keeping him around to play 2 games before you bench him, there's an elephant in the room, and the guys who hate to lose are going to be pissed off about it.
So let's talk about what they have right now.
Yeah.
Forget what's in the past. You can't change it, right? But right now, there's no reason why we're not stuffing the ball to Kenny G 12 times a game. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just keep going at it. Get downfield. That crappy offensive line looks pretty damn good at pass protection, except for Solder, that is. But, at the end of the day, you have tools. Even with Shepard and Slayton out, you've got Tony, you've got Galladay, you got Rudolph. Look, you win an entire game with 2 stud tight ends between Caden Smith and Rudolph, and they had 1 target between them. That's a problem.
Can I ask you? And this is for everybody. Listen, everybody, in this space. I have one question, and I want to talk about the quarterback for a second, right? And Giants Rush, feel free to answer this too. We're at the point. This is Daniel Jones' 3rd year, and this is typically the year where we start talking about contracts, right? And this is what my earlier point when me and you were sort of going back and forth is like, do we have that question answered? Like, is this our franchise quarterback? I can't answer that one way or the other. I have a tough time evaluating Daniel Jones. And a lot of that's the Giants' fault because I don't think they're playing to his strengths. But that's part of the whole, like when we talk about how long is this quote-unquote rebuild going to take or restart, a lot of that's determined on the quarterback. And given where the quarterback is on his timeline, year 3 of his rookie contract, we don't know. So like that, my question to everyone is...
We don't know or you don't know?
You cannot definitively say that Daniel Jones is a franchise quarterback. You just know
you cannot say that right now. There's no damn way.
I'll make this question very simple. Is it time to discuss contract extension with Daniel Jones? Like, would you give Daniel Jones a contract extension?
Because he's the least of my problems right now. I'm not overly concerned. The guy played against a great Washington defense. They actually opened up the playbook. He made some phenomenal throws. He ran the ball, demanded the offense. And I'm completely comfortable with that, but not if they're not going to let him play with the toys in the room. There's no reason why Tony's not on the field. There's no reason why Rudolph's not getting targets. Like, you can't expect anything out of the guy if they don't allow him to play ball. It's basically you're asking him to play quarterback with an arm behind his back because you're handing the ball to the fullback. You're running screens and 8-yard curls. It won't matter.
So
Let
me say one thing. It's something I've been thinking about a lot today, and I agree with that to an extent, right? I mean, we've been here for 3 hours. We talked about Jason Garrett and Joe Judge and the broken offense a lot early on. I think one thing that we don't talk about enough is there are plenty of quarterbacks, and we discuss it with other teams around the league all the time. There are plenty of quarterbacks that drag bad coaches and bad coordinators and bad offensive systems to winning records and into the playoffs. And I get it. Garrett is a huge problem, but at the same time, there has to be some element of Jones' game where he's elevating everyone around him and making Jason Garrett and Joe Judge look semi-competent, and we haven't seen that.
Are you watching film? Are you watching the All-22, Ethan?
The All-22, yeah. Where's Dan Schneider when you need him? Listen,
I'm just asking. Are you watching?
No, I think Jones has. I really do. It's again, the proof is in the pudding. Where if you're not giving the dude an opportunity to produce explosive plays, because that is what drives an offense in today's NFL. And particularly to start this year, I mean, the Giants' offense is an above-average offense when you look at EPA with expected points added. So even though they're not putting points on the board, Ethan, there's also no yards after the catch in this offense.
We've been churning a lot of people, and we've got a lot of new listeners. So if for anyone who doesn't know, can you explain EPA real quick?
Yeah. So expected points added is one of the more well-known metrics out there to evaluate both offensive play and defensive play. It's most typically known for overall team play, but I like to look at it for quarterbacks as well. So basically is how much is a certain player or how much is a certain unit in the way that they move the ball, what are they doing that's expected to put points on the board eventually? There's a lot of good ESPN articles written on it too. So it's just a different way to look at how points are being put on the board and et cetera, et cetera. So Jones has been above average in EPA. If you like to look at PFF grade, he's been one of the best PFF graded passers, and he's never been graded highly by PFF either. So I think he is rising above the scheme. It's just really, we said it earlier, and I really don't think we need to dive in much further. I know we've been going for like 3 hours, so coming up with new talking points is necessary, but I really don't think we need to expand upon further of we don't know whether Daniel Jones is a franchise guy or not because he hasn't been given the opportunity, and I don't think there's any more deep diving into it. Tony Romo, I mean, here's just the other example that we had with Jason Garrett. Tony Romo did it. Tony Romo rose above, and
that's my point.
A maestro at the line of scrimmage, and he was awesome. He took over the offense, and you're seeing Jones do that time to time. But also, I mean, was that not a Hall of Fame edge rusher that they had in DeMarcus Ware? Was that not arguably a Hall of Fame left tackle in Tyrone Smith? Was that not also a couple good wide receivers in Terrell Owens, Des Bryant, a Hall of Fame tight end? Daniel Jones does not have that. So that's the difference in those two situations there. But yeah, Tony Romo made something happen, but also the situation around Tony Romo was a lot better than what's going on with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like you said, you just don't know. But if you don't at the end of this year, then you can't, expect him to stay another year. You can't saddle him to another coach or another GM. And thanks for giving me a chance to speak here, guys. I really appreciate it. Just two things I kind of wanted to say, and then I'll go back on mute or whatever. But the big thing being is that I'm out on Judge, and here's why. Pretty much at the end of this year, Dave Gettleman he cannot be here. He cannot be here, and I can't expect a new GM, to come in here and want to keep Judge. When I want an aggressive coach, and when I'm seeing us punting on that 4th and 3, I mean I don't want that. You know what I'm saying? The other thing I kind of wanted to say too is this team is so broken, and I'm at the point now where I'm watching the games just out of just pure feeling like I have to out of obligation. But I need this owner to be embarrassed because I don't know if I don't know if he needs to hit rock bottom if anything's going to ever change. And I kind of heard Craig, you said something about we're kind of all in this together. There's nothing we can really do, and I disagree with that because if you go back, if you Google New York Giants fan revolt 1970s, back in the 70s there was a Giants fan revolt. It was covered in the New York Times.
Come on, man.
No, I'm dead serious, dude. Go look it up.
I need to look it up. I lived it. Okay.
Okay.
I mean,
exactly.
But it's
exactly.
Not,
and what happened?
It's not going to happen.
What happened? The NFL forced George Young.
That will never happen. That will never
not going to
happen
happen
in this NFL.
It's not going to happen
Never.
in this day and age. It's not going to happen.
Exactly.
No, but
Not
I don't
gonna
think that's
happen.
his point.
That
I don't
was
think
the
that's his
70s,
point.
bro. It's 2021. That's not going to happen.
But I don't think that's the point. I don't think the point is the NFL steps in. I think the point is that John Mara gets so embarrassed that something drastic happens.
Exactly.
Like what?
Exactly.
Like what?
Like
People running banners over the stadium.
Exactly. He's
people
not-
calling in.
Are
People
you-
calling in.
are you
double
insane?
no,
Every
I'm serious. Stuff like that.
Guys,
Dude,
this
the
has
guy
been
reads
happening
fan
for
mail.
decades.
He reads fan mail every single week.
Bad football teams everywhere. The Giants have not always been great. They've had losing years all through the 70s and through the early 90s. There's no one flying banners over that. I mean, first of all, after September 11th, there ain't nobody flying over the stadium, dude. All right,
They're flying over. They
that's
can't fly during.
That's
during
a pre-approved
pregame.
flight. That's a
You guys don't even
flight.
want to know what kind of NFTs people are going to mint to make fun of this organization. But I want to invite I see Clem from Barstool, who joined a bunch of us on Sunday in the parking lot, is here, and Clem's always got some really good things to say about the Giants and some great insights. So Clem, thrilled to have you on. What are you thinking? How you feel?
Thanks for having me. I just wanted to shout you guys out, everyone who's either hosting or listening, because I saw this thing bubbling up, I don't even know, hours ago, and then I had to put my daughter to bed, and I wanted to hop on, and she was like, "Come on, put me to bed." So I go in, lay down with her. I fall asleep. I come back hours later, and not only is this thing still going, it's bigger than it was when I went to bed. So if that's not a sign of how flawed this franchise is from the top on,
We're on our
I
way
don't
to
know what it
1,000
is,
listeners right now. We're well over 900. This is legitimately insane.
It's crazy, but it's also like I'm proud of us
pretty
at least
awesome.
doing our part. I wish the team would do this every single Sunday. We wouldn't be here if the team could handle this. But I was gonna kind of just make that same kind of point, kind of stole my thunder. It's like I'd love for there to be a George Young thrown into the lap of the Maras and saying fix this, but there's not a commissioner in the world. Actually, the only commissioner who's less likely to do that than Roger Goodell is Rob Manfred. But both those guys, like, there is no chance in the world. So we are in this mess until something happens with John Mara. Maybe when Michael Strahan's retirement game comes and there's more Eagles fans in the stadium than Giants fans, maybe that's what kind of makes the light bulb go off. But I mean, I don't have faith in him fixing everything. And I try to be the optimistic guy. And at this point, if you can't even just give us the Garrett, get rid of Garrett. I'm not asking for you to bring in the next great offensive mind. Just throw in Freddie Kitchens. I'll take interim Freddie Kitchens right now as the offensive coordinator over what we've been watching. And if you're not going to just fix that side of the and maybe make the team better, which, let's be honest, all the injuries now, it's like that's going to be the next wave is when we can't stop the run without Martinez. We don't have Nick Gates in the middle of the line, taking care of that. I feel like there's a chance it's going to get really ugly, especially with the schedule. Then again, this is the Giants. They'll beat the Saints on Sunday and we'll be roped back in. But it's I just wanted to say shout out to all you guys for keeping this thing going. For an old man who passed out, I'm happy we still got this thing going. There's a fire that's lit, and we can't let it go. I don't want to burn down the stadium like Bobby's saying, but I don't want to say I don't want to do it. I just think I don't want to have my name on the record saying it. But that stadium's everything, the epitome of what this franchise has become. It's a nice, shiny thing.
Exactly.
And inside, it is
Looks like a
empty,
prison
hollow.
It's a
It's
cinder
not what
block
should
in a
be in the
freaking
21st
swamp.
century.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and this owner needs to be embarrassed before things are going to change. It's going to take John Mara hitting rock bottom for him to kick his little brother out of the front office.
I thought last Sunday was bad. I thought him getting booed by the entire stadium. And the crazy part about it was, even when he called Eli Manning a future Hall of Famer, the boos got even louder for him. Like, it was insane seeing what happened to him on Sunday, and I think that was pretty bad.
The problem is that no matter how bad this team is, you're going to still have assholes like me who, after all of this stuff is going on over the past 3 weeks, I still talked to a Giants representative last night about season tickets. Okay, like it's not going to change because one, we're all freaking crazy. Okay, we're crazy about this team. It does not matter what this team does. We're crazy about it. Okay, I have been around the world 3 times, and all 3 times I've had Giants shit with me everywhere that I've been. Okay, and now that I'm in a situation where I can afford to buy season tickets, it's the first thing I'm gonna do because I'm crazy about the Giants, win or lose. Right. And that's how we all feel. That's why we're sitting here at 11 o'clock at night, still having this conversation. The wilderness years will not happen again. OK, but if we do things like this, if we create these Twitter spaces and there's 1,000 people in here at 11 o'clock at night talking about how upset we are, then maybe that's the new wilderness years. This is the new wilderness years of us letting it be known. Who cares about writing a letter? We've got Twitter, we've got YouTube, we've got Twitch, we've got podcasts, we've got ways to get information to these people in a second. Okay, this is the new wilderness years right here. And no, Roger Goodell is not going to make things change for the New York Giants, even though they should, right? We're a very historic franchise. The NFL wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for us. The damn football is named after our late owner, okay? But like
the Duke.
Listen, like this is where we are. This is where we are. And it sucks that it took this to bring all of the people, because a lot of the people who are in here talking, we've been arguing with each other for the last 3 years about this shit on Twitter. I've argued with Will. I've argued with Nikki Snacks. I've argued with Justin. I've argued with Ethan. I've argued with Hefe.
That's false. We've never argued. Don't do that to me.
Are you guys about to argue about whether or not you've argued?
We have argued, Dustin. You didn't know who I was at the time, but we've argued. Okay.
Okay, I apologize. I was wrong.
Everyone. I see Lawrence Tynes is in here. I've probably argued with him, Kid Blue, Rob Zero, Michael. All these people, we've all argued on this app about this team, and it's taken us to this point for us to all come together and go, what the fuck? Like this is the new wilderness years. But even this is not necessarily going to change what John Mara is going to do in that building. We have to ride this bitch out and figure it out. Like that's
all right. Pest, I have a solution.
Yeah, what you got?
We won't change John Mayer's mind unless we burn down MetLife Stadium.
Boom. There you go.
Listen, man, I got warrants.
All right, guys.
Dustin, he was murdering on his Pee Wee football field.
Listen, that's on a football field. You're allowed to murder someone on the football field. It's part of the game, okay? It's part of the game.
I'm not so sure about
field,
that.
Though.
I believe the NFLPA does give them qualified immunity. I believe that might be.
The current precedent is you're allowed to murder someone as long as you don't taunt for more than 2 full seconds.
No, you can't do 3 hip thrusts, okay? That you definitely can't do that. You can't spin the ball. You can't look at them with a mean mug. You can't do anything. But if you hit them so hard that their helmet pops off and their head's still in the helmet rolling down the field, that's cool. That's you might get flagged on it, and you might catch a fine from the league.
So
well, you'll be able to play next week.
Let's get back to earth for a second, because
you'll also end up in Rutgers, but
we're talking about like hypothetical felonies versus the much worse reality of like we might be 0-4, or as John Mara would say, we might be 0-3 and down at halftime. But let's go around and with the speakers here. Let's try to talk about something encouraging. Let's everybody give 3 names of guys on the roster that they think that that they want to buy their career right now, that they think fans are going to be excited with what they see either for the rest of this year or for the rest of their Giant careers. So let's start with Jamie. You want to take this? I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
Wow, you're really helping me here. I'm going to go on a very, very controversial ledge, and I'm actually going to say Daniel Jones, because I've really liked what I've seen from him. I think he's not making a lot of the same mistakes as he was last year. I really do think he's growing. I don't know if he's the guy, which everyone seems to think, but I think he just needed some time. I really do. He's corrected a lot of stuff. I just don't know if it's the coaches that don't trust him or just the coaches being inept. I know it's people have talked about it left and right, but I mean, I think it's a combination of the two, and I really think they need to start trusting him more. And I don't know what it's going to take for them to trust him. But besides that, I mean, Dexter Lawrence would love to try to see something else there. But I mean, who else? I really don't know who else I could see on this roster.
Andrew Thomas, maybe.
Andrew Thomas.
Andrew Thomas for sure. I mean, that's
Graham Gano.
Yeah, I would have said
Ojulari.
Would have said Nick Gates too before he got hurt.
Yeah, but I mean, Andrew Thomas really. I mean, what we're seeing happen with this offensive line right now, and why it's not a complete and utter disaster, is because number one, I think Daniel Jones has improved his pocket presence, which there's a lot of research that's been done that quarterbacks largely control their QB hit, their pressure rate, and their sack rate. But the fact that Andrew Thomas is being a rock and he's allowed the 4th least pressure rate out of all tackles in the National Football League to start the season too, the fact that he's been a rock to start this year, it has made the rest of the line, which Bredesen is a disaster, Price is a disaster, Hernandez is solid, and Solder is even worse than he was in 2019, and he was the worst tackle in football then. So the fact that Thomas has been a rock has kept this line afloat, and I think that is such an exciting guy to get behind and to be invested in The fact that the second most valuable position in the game of football, which is left tackle, the fact that that can be taken care of, doesn't matter what quarterback we have, doesn't matter what GM, they're going to appreciate that and they're going to ride with that guy.
Yeah, I think the only person that loves Andrew Thomas more than I do is probably Justin and Bobby.
Yeah.
I loved him coming out of the draft. Him and Tristan Wirfs were my two guys at the top in that 2020 class. But I'm with you, man. We talk about like cornerstone guys, like who's that leader. I think Andrew Thomas can come out as that. I've been really, really impressed by him. And Justin, you nailed it, man. He's been great this year. And I think when you're able to find that franchise left tackle, it goes a long way. Because like you said, man, he's the second most important position. I agree.
I'm definitely going with Ojulari by hands down. Guy got him in the second round. Could have been a first-round pick. Guy's exciting. He's got a sack in every single game. He's the future on the defense. Ojulari has he's got great bend in his hips. You can see he loves playing the game. So on the defensive side, Will, I'm buying Ojulari.
All right, what else we got? Who?
I was going to say
next?
it got way too quiet in here.
I thought my phone froze up.
Me too. I thought
Next.
my phone broke.
All right. Well, you know me. I'm miserable and hate them all. But if I was going to say anybody, Andrew Thomas was my number one pick. Aziz was going to be up there too. We haven't seen much, but it's probably due to offensive coordinator incompetency and scheme fit. But I can't wait till Kadarius Toney gets unlocked because I truly believe he's going to be a terrific playmaker. Get him the ball in space, let him do his thing. So when this whole Jason Garrett charade is over and they finally open up that playbook, bring in somebody that's, I don't know, in the 21st century and in 2021 NFL football, then I am fully excited on him. And another guy who, he just got hurt, but that's been playing out of his mind the first 3 games. And I thought this was for sure his last year. Now I don't think so. Sterling Shepard. Like, that guy has been a great Giant his whole career, and I think I want to see him continue to be on this team, whether that means Slayton's gone, which probably is the case. But Shepard, I'm worried about those injuries, obviously, but he is just such a hard-nosed player. He's a great Giant. I feel for him because he was having such a great year. I hope
Sterling Shepard may play this
doesn't
summer.
linger. Yeah, I know he might, but he's just going to re-injure it, and then he's screwed for the rest of the season. But yeah, see what I did there? Look at that maturity, by the way.
So
I just caught myself.
There's a name I want to mention, and I apologize to everyone. I think we've been on so long that my AirPod just died, and I think I've ruined the experience for about 1,000 people. But obviously Blake Martinez is out right now, and that's gonna be a big hit. But the two guys we got at the end of the draft last year, we had both Tay Crowder and Carter Coughlin, who are both inside linebackers who are going to be trying to fill in for Blake. And I think specifically Tay's really shown some flashes, and I'm really excited to see what he's going to be able to do this year. So obviously you don't want to see anybody get injured, but this is going to be a real opportunity for Tay, and I think that if we can find Mr. Irrelevant to be a starter going forward, that's a really, really good thing for the Giants.
Yeah, he's looked solid. He's looked solid this year for sure.
I wouldn't mind saying Crowder takes some snaps at defensive end too. I know they moved him position-wise, but he's had like 5 snaps. He's not getting on the field on the inside, and we don't get a lot of pressure on the QB. I wouldn't mind seeing him try to get some snaps on the outside too, because you have to lose. We have no pressure now.
I'm not. Sorry, Craig. Were you talking about Coughlin or Crowder right there?
Coughlin, because they took Coughlin from a DN, made him an inside linebacker. Yeah, I'm just making a point. I love Crowder. He had a great year last year before he got hurt. He played great next to Martinez. But here we are with Coughlin as an inside linebacker, which I thought he did really well. I hope you guys might feel the same way, but for some reason he can't seem to even package in. I thought he would have packages to get himself some snaps, and he's not. So I'm even kind of curious if Graham could maybe get him back some snaps on the outside. I feel like you said, they're there, but he doesn't seem to be being.
I tend to pride myself on not being married to a player. I've learned my lesson about that in the past. But a kid that I'm really excited about, and I hope that he shows us something. I've been excited about him from the beginning. Is Xavier McKinney. I am so excited about that kid, and I think that he could potentially be a cornerstone defensive player for us. It's all going to depend on how he looks the rest of the year. I know he's made some mistakes. But I really think that he's going to be good. And so I'm excited to watch his growth as he is here. And hopefully he is a player that I can be kind of married to. kinda, but not all the way. So that's a name that I'm like watching very, very closely because I really like the kid.
Another guy that I think we're all kind of on the same page where there's a Thomas, or we hope the best for Jones. He's shown some flashes. God knows I want him to be good. Or the guy, I don't know. I don't think we're going to know that. But one guy that I think I'd like to buy low on in this, like, I guess this game is, like, I think one of the few players that has actually united Giants Twitter was like the Galladay signing was like, oh, we're actually going after this. We're getting a guy that is going to make the big plays. And I don't think it's been his fault. Obviously, the injuries didn't help matters. But I think if we do get a guy who plays, who calls the plays the right way and expands the field, if he can stay healthy, I like that he was yelling at Garrett on the sidelines. I like what I've seen from him. You know, the guy went from the Lions to the Giants. The guy just wants to win, dude. That's all he needs. So if we can get the right plays being called, I think he has obviously the talent, and he's someone that the fan base all agreed with for the most part in the offseason was a necessary piece to take the next step. Like, I'd love to buy low on Galladay. I think everyone forgets how good that guy was, not even just with Stafford, but again, Driscoll and Blau were the quarterbacks, and he was putting up numbers. It's like, just let that guy cook. So, there's really not a lot of players you could choose from because I think this team has just been ravaged from the last 5 years, but I think he's one of them. He's a high-priced guy, obviously, and the injuries worry you, but I don't know. I think that dude's super talented. I love him.
I have a question.
Can I chime in really quick?
Oh, yes, please.
Oh, here. I follow all you guys. Everybody on here is awesome. I've talked to Ethan and Weiss, in tweets before, and I just need to vent a little bit, right? So I think there's 4 things wrong with the Giants right now, right? So I'm just going to try to rattle through them quick. I know we talked about most of them, but I need to get off my chest, right? So one, it's ownership for me, right? And it starts at the top. Everybody knows it, and I know we already discussed it, but yeah, Mara wants the Giants to be good, and there's no doubt about it. But look, he's had an easy time with Eli at the helm, right? Eli won the 2 Super Bowls. No one was ever going to call for Eli's head, or even Mara said, well, Eli was there because we all believed in Eli all the way, up into his final years with the team. So now he has to make a ton of changes since Eli left, and he's just simply out of touch. Mara's too old school. The NFL has completely changed, since the whole time Eli's been here for 16 years, and he's just out of touch, and it's sad. The second thing I think is wrong is the GM, and where do I start here? And to me, it's he's drafted one player so far that can turn into a game changer, right? And I think that's Saquon. And you must be able to draft game changers, and it allows you to lock up studs, with either 5 years on the rookie contract or 4 years. And remember that Seattle team when they drafted Russell? He played in 2 bowls in his first 3 seasons, right? I think it was first 3 seasons, and I always said they got that D because he's on his rookie contract. They were able to load up on those contracts, right? And I think that's just the recipe for success. And you can plug the holes with free agency, but here's the thing, we all love the Giants so much, and we just even talked about it, who we're going to buy low on, and we talked about Carter Coughlin and Tate Crowder. And when we draft these players, like Zoe Carter or even Darius Slayton, and they make a big play, we send text to everybody, right? And we always say in all caps, big play Slay or Zoe with like 700 O's. But here's the thing. They aren't going to be. The truth of the matter is they aren't going to be big time impact players, and I don't need to rattle off all the players that get them undrafted because it's honestly a waste of time. And again, I'm the biggest Giants fan out there, but I can guarantee you more than 75% of the guys that he drafted on our team will be out of the league after we cut them. I mean, even look at Reese's last couple drafts. I mean, they were just atrocious, right? The third thing is the coaches. And I talked to Ethan about this. We hired a special teams coach to be our head coach. And it just boggles my mind, right? And you can clearly tell that he's just not ready, right?
So I want to keep this a little bite-sized just to make sure that we can address all your points. And I want to say something about what you're saying about drafting people. You got to remember that we've had a lot of day 3 picks, and the average shelf life of the day 3 pick is only a few years. So obviously, like a guy like Corey Ballantyne didn't work out for us in 2019. There's a big difference between missing on Corey Ballantyne and then getting a three picks for a first round pick and missing on DeAndre Baker for off the field issues. So I just wanted to make sure we address some of that before we get into the coaching. And I also think that I know a bunch of us a bunch of our hosts have been DMing me saying that they're ready to wrap it up. So I just want to give everybody like a couple minutes to say anything else they want to add. I think this has been a really fantastic experience. I feel I've been very angry all week, and I feel like a lot's been off my chest fermenting. I'm sure I'll be just as angry tomorrow morning. But, I think I've seen a lot of good feedback on Twitter. I'm really happy that everybody was able to come in and talk shop, and we're able to talk about the team that we all like, and nobody was really attacking anybody who disagreed with us. So I didn't mean to cut anybody off, but yeah, if everyone wants to get in a few closing thoughts.
Quick sentence, that's it, and then I'm done. The thing about Daniel Jones being a franchise quarterback, I just want to ask this one question, right? I don't think he's our franchise quarterback, right? And for me, another way to look at it, if you can say your quarterback can start on more than 22 teams in this league, then you got your franchise quarterback. And I think it's as simple as that. And if someone on here can tell me that Jones can start on more than 3 teams in this league, I'm all ears. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think he can. You just look at bottom of the barrel teams in the NFL, and I certainly think Jones has proved enough, especially that he's put together more than around maybe a half a season where he hasn't thrown in a single interception, and that was the caveat for his rookie year, is that he turns over the ball and he throws the interception. He still has the fumble problem, so to speak, I guess, but not turning over the ball. But again, he hasn't been given the opportunity to prove that he is that franchise guy. So, I mean, Will, I'll wrap up on my end. I mean, the fact that, we peaked with, around 1,000 people in here, and the fact that we've been going for a couple hours, this is what it's all about. I mean, this is what content's about. This is what being a fan's about. This is what being a community of Giants fans is all about. And tonight, I'm very thankful for tonight. I'm very thankful that you had the idea to do this. I was very happy to be a part of it. And some of the people that have spoken tonight and the people that are in here right now, some of my favorite people in the world. So thank you very much. I love all of you.
Well, that was pretty nice, Justin. There's a lot of things that I would agree with. I pretty much love everybody as well outside of you and Ethan, but
harsh but fair.
All harsh but fair. But, that's it. No, for real. Will, you had texted us earlier this week to do something like this, and I don't think it could have been more perfect. So thank you, everybody, for coming in. It was very therapeutic. I am going to continue on my path since Sunday of not sleeping, not eating, and all these other things. It's just really, to me, I think that's the most healthy thing. But I thought this was really healthy.
Snacks.
Too, so.
Not to blow up your spot. I know you ate enough Sunday night that you don't really need to eat for another week and a half. But
that's a really good point. I clogged my arteries with enough cheese that would kill a horse. So I did do that. Hey, listen, sometimes you just got to do it. But in all seriousness, thank you guys. Hopefully we can go shock the world on Sunday. That would be really great, because then we could do this again next week, and maybe we all have a little bit of jubilant energy, and that would be a lot of fun. But seriously, Will, thanks for putting this together, and thank you everybody for joining and taking part in this conversation. All beautiful points, all beautiful people. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Yeah, I mean, just want to echo off what Justin, Nick said. Will, thank you for setting this up. It's been fun. I mean, just sitting here looking around, seeing the type of people that entered. Saw Carl Banks in here, saw Lawrence Tynes in here. It was awesome. I saw people in here that at one point over the last 4 or 5 years have cursed at me and threatened me because they didn't agree with my takes, but it's all fun. But again, this was awesome. I hope to do this again. I think ultimately, regardless where you are, what your opinion is, I think we're all in the same boat. We all want this team to be better, and I think more so than before, we're very united on that. And I hope we continue doing stuff like this. I mean, it was awesome seeing 1,000 people. That's crazy. So, Will, thanks a lot. Justin, Nick, it was awesome. Ethan, I always love you, brother. And I appreciate it.
That makes one person in the world that loves Ethan, so it's really good. I just want a last quick thing, because he couldn't actually get in here tonight, and Bobby Skinner made a really good point that our new addition,
he's a fraud.
Our new addition today, Isaiah
media scum.
He should be somebody that Isaiah Wilson should be somebody that we're all married to and rooting for, because he's a former first-round pick. So that's probably the future of the New York Giants. And Bobby, really great point. So I'm glad I helped you get that out there. You media scum, reporting facts first before Ian Rappaport, loser. Okay, goodbye. It was really great, everybody. Thank you.
Hey, man, I really love you guys. I really do. One thing that defines a family is the ability to disagree and fight and yell and scream and curse, but be able to come back to the table and break bread together. I've met a lot of you guys in person, mostly at FanFest. That was amazing. Can't wait to see you guys at the stadium when I can get up there and I can drive from Virginia up to Jersey. This was amazing. Thank you so much, Will, for putting this together. Thank you for inviting me. I hope to be a part of these in the future. I hope that everyone truly enjoyed this. I hope that y'all were able to get your frustrations out or hear something that is similar to your frustration and allow that to help ease the pain. Listen, y'all, we're going to be okay. And it may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen next year, but we're going to be okay. And as long as we stick together as long as we continue to be family, we're going to be all right. Good times, bad times, championships, or first round picks, first overall picks. It doesn't matter. We're all family. So I hope everybody has a great rest of your night. And I'll see you guys around the Twitter spaces. Thank y'all very much. Y'all take care. Deuces.
Thanks, Pest.
And good luck on those murder charges, Pest.
They'll never catch me. They'll never get me.
I just wanted to say, thank you guys for letting me speak so much tonight. I'm not a content creator, and I don't have a ton of close relationships. It's more on the casual side on Twitter with you guys. So I really appreciate it. This was awesome, and I would love to be a part of it in the future.
Awesome, guys. Well, I'm about to shut it down. I really want to thank everybody for speaking. Everybody for tuning in. I mean, this is a really remarkable experience tonight. We had 3 times as many people in here as went to my high school, which is pretty cool. I mean, go Giants. We want I think all anybody in here wants is to see the Giants succeed and to see the people being able to trust the players, trust the coaches, trust the executives into being committed to getting this right. And I want to say, like Joe Judge said, we're going to be all right, guys. We're going to be all right. Let's hope that Judge is the guy. But we'll probably do this again. We'll maybe try to set up a hashtag so we can have a little more structure next time. But this was a real lot of fun. So thank you, everybody. Go Blue.
Great job, Will. Great job, Will.
Thanks, Trey.
Nicely done.